Heavenly Father, today we put on the full armor to protect us against attack. We put on the belt of truth to protect against lies and deception. We put on the breastplate of righteousness to protect our hearts from the temptations. We put the gospel of peace on our feet to walk in your light, peace, and freedom with the Holy Spirit. We rebuke anxious thoughts. We take up your shield of faith for protection to block and destroy all the darts and threats thrown at us by the enemy. We put on the helmet of salvation to cover our minds and thoughts, reminding us that we are children of a mighty King. We are forgiven, set free, saved by the blood of Jesus. We take up the sword of the Spirit, your living word, that has the power to demolish strongholds and is sharper than any double-edged sword. We come to you, Lord, in prayer daily. In Jesus' mighty name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
What's up, you guys? Welcome to The Imagination. I'm your host, Emma, and today I'm honored to introduce you all to Satanic Ritual Abuse, Mind Control, and Religious Abuse Survivor and Whistleblower, life coach, mother, silversmith and jewelry maker, entrepreneur, public speaker, seminar host, podcast host of her own podcast called Letters to the People, and a woman on a mission to educate people about the realities of ritualistic trauma and abuse, Raine. Asia was born into a multi-generational incest-based Mormon and Satanic family in Utah, and her abuse began from an early age where she was ceremonially groomed by the Mormon Church and was used repeatedly in satanic rituals and mind control programming. Asia speaks about the levels under the Mormon Temples where she was abused and helps us to understand the relationship between satanic ritual abuse and how it is able to hide so well in spaces like the LDS Church. Asia was also a victim of trauma-based mind control and also helps us to understand the inner workings of the occult and how these abuse systems run rampant and hide behind goodwill and secrecy. Just as the founder of the LDS Church was a Freemason, religious systems and bodies are often used and designed to compartmentalize and promote secrecy through the same order, oaths, and hierarchy structures that you'd see in a Masonic Lodge. And as you'll see with Asia, her life was laden with secrecy, buried in the depths of a double life, dissociation, and repressed memories. Asia has dedicated almost 25 years to her healing journey by being what she calls her own inner archaeologist. And now, after mastering the art of looking within, Asia helps and teaches other survivors to do the same. Asia has her own podcast called Letters to the People, her own thriving business, and honors the power that inner work has in changing lives. She also works as an intuitive life coach where she performs memory recovery and past life sessions and inner child work with individual clients as well as groups. Asia understands the deep inner work required for healing and utilizes a lifetime of skills to assist others in their personal journeys through life. She has appeared on multiple media outlets and podcasts as well, where she helps to inform and educate others as well as validate victims. In Asia's spare time, she is a silversmith with a penchant for making beautiful jewelry, and she loves hiking and spending time with her doggie. Asia has been one of the most requested guests that all of you have asked to have on the show, and I couldn't be more honored to share her testimony and wisdom with all of you. Asia's abusers thought that they could break her, but all that ended up breaking with Asia was the cycle of generational trauma. I ask you all to put away whatever you're doing and give this brave woman and amazing warrior your full attention. Before I finish introducing today's guest, I wanted to give just a couple quick reminders and updates. If you'd like to be on the podcast as a guest, share any information privately with me, or submit a written testimony to be published in my upcoming book series or as an article on my Substack, you can email me at imagineabetterworld2020@gmail.com. I'm also proud to announce my partnership with one of my favorite brands, Rife Technologies, which is a new and innovative company dedicated to revolutionizing the health tech industry. The Real Rife machine is an electromagnetic radio frequency device engineered by scientist Dr. Royal Raymond Rife in the 1920s, used to address various health concerns. These technologies have been used and referenced by many podcast guests on this podcast, and I'm excited to announce that you can now gift yourself with 15% off your Rife Technologies order with the discount link posted in the show notes. All the rest of my links are in the show notes as well, and I'd love your support across all platforms. Thank you all for caring so deeply about survivors and whistleblowers, and for helping to make the imagination the safest space on the internet for survivor and whistleblower disclosures. So, you guys, without further ado, please help me in welcoming today's guest of honor, survivor and survivor advocate, voice for the voiceless, selfless servant, walking miracle, content creator and business owner, fierce mama bear, and a warrior with a healthy passion for truth, the one, the only, Asia Raine. Asia, thank you so much for being here with me today.
Thank you so much for the invitation, that introduction, all of that. That was I almost wanted to find out who you were talking about. It was, you know what I'm saying? Like, wow, sometimes we don't really view ourselves quite the way that that others would share. And that was really, really beautiful. And Fierce Mama Bear does come through on some of this for sure. And everything else that you said, I really appreciate the recognition and the introduction to that. And then also the one thing that I was a little surprised about and deeply moved by, and this was, relayed in our emails, and then you did actually say it here in the introduction, is that other people have written to you and asked that I be on your show or that we connect somehow. And that kind of took me, I don't want to say it took me by surprise, but it did. I was just kind of sat there and I reread that sentence like, wow, really? So I am very interested in spreading the word and talking about my experience and other, validating. I remember when I was in my healing process, like really, really in the deep darks, the trenches part of working through the memory recovery and subsequent body memories and things like that, the way the whole situation is. And we can talk about that just I can describe that better, but being in it and bringing all of that forward, I just remember like knowing that there are certain things that I really, really, really wanted to have validation on. And this was back in 2003 when I began, and there wasn't this really around to validate. In fact, I started my healing kind of on the heels of the late 90s satanic panic era, and I didn't even know what that was. I had no idea. This was just not in my wheelhouse. And so one of the things that, as I went through my healing and as I kind of came out on the other side, the one thing that I've wanted to really, really bring forward is some validation and just let other survivors and victims know that you're not crazy. It is a very interesting path to trod, and it's like a multi-layered Rubik's cube that you're trying to put things together. It's even more than a puzzle, because it's like, it's dimensionality, there's just so many aspects to it that, validation's nice. That's my way of saying I'm here for that.
Absolutely, and it is making a difference. I think too, as creators, we spend a lot of time on others as far as providing, whether it's a podcast or services, and
Mhm.
we see the progress that it makes and how more and more people are waking up, whether it's you see it on a micro level working with clients and you're seeing more clients coming to you, or if it's in the real world, but I think sometimes this work too can be a little thankless from, society, because a lot of them don't want to look at this and it can be really frustrating. And I just want you to know that there are people watching you. There are people that care about what you're doing, and it's been an overwhelming response of emails and comments. Have you heard of Asia Raine? And, it's awesome to see that, people are getting impacted by this type of work, and that what you're doing, even though you've been doing it for so long and it probably feels like this uphill battle, like the ball's starting to roll and people are starting to get it and they're starting to share it with other people. And
Yeah.
it's really beautiful the difference that you've made in the community after so many years of, probably just kind of grinding and putting your head down and dealing with a lot of warfare,
Yeah.
and now you have just this overwhelming army around you, which is really beautiful.
Yeah. And you've brought that to my attention even more. And so it's really beautiful. So thank you. And I mean, honestly, thank you to your audience, your listeners, for even bringing forward the suggestion. That's really, it touches my heart. So thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome. And so for a lot of people, I did get some requests. So there's going to be listeners that have probably followed you religiously and,
Mhm.
just are very familiar with your story. But since you're new to probably a lot of my audience, I wanted to spend some time talking about your testimony and thought we'd go back in time and sort of
Mhm.
set the scene up for the family that you were born into and talk about some of the history of your parents, grandparents, how far back did this potentially go, and
Yeah.
just any information that you have to sort of set it up for why and how you ended up being sort of pushed into this after your birth.
Yeah, absolutely. So it did begin with me at birth. And just to kind of generally answer the question, it was generational, is generational still because of my family. Um, I am the only one that has gone through extensive work to heal. I do have one cousin on my paternal side, my dad's side, that I he made some strides in breaking away from it in a way that I trust. It's not been his mission or his desire to really even do anything other than that, which is great. But it was fascinating because in my work over I was recovering memories and doing very, very focused, intensive work uncovering what had happened to me or what my history, what my real underground life was like for almost 9 years. And in that in that part, I just basically trusted myself to bring forth whatever was ready to be healed. And I would really like to make a point on that as anybody that is actively choosing to work on themselves, no matter what your modality is or combinations of modalities, you really, really, really need to get in partnership with you and trust the process of how this is going. Because I am going to say that it's my firm belief that your body, your mind, your spirit, your heart, your emotions, all that makes this you, there are it's there are like underlying or influences that are you that really just want to heal. Your body is constantly regenerating itself and wanting to heal, and so is your spirit, so is your emotions. Like we are really built in a very, very specific way to be magnified, to really move ourselves into the best part of ourselves that we can be, especially as who we were created by, right? There is a creator, right? And this is what we're kind of magnetized to go towards. And from that, just even at the cellular level, that's the way we operate. We are always regenerating, we're always flushing out the old and bringing in the new. And it's really important to trust that process, trust where you are in that process. And then also just know that you might not really understand the way it's going. Like it might not make sense to you. You might want it to happen chronologically, or you might want to have your body heal first before your emotions can heal, or before, like it doesn't work that way. And so stepping into partnership, that's a challenge. But it can really be a very, very powerful personal journey. And that's something that I discovered as I was going along in my healing and not really knowing that. So what my journey was 100% all self-discovery. I didn't have um, really anybody to bounce this off of. I had my therapist, and I had a friend that I worked closely with that was also closely connected to satanic ritual just from her own family experiences. And she'd already been in the process of healing, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 years before I even got close to what was happening with me. And so she was able to track it. She was able to kind of see. So as you're, like I could actually, there's things that I can see now in others is when they really start working for their own healing. There's just patterns. There's patterns there that you can look at and go, I wonder if this is actually going to lead where I think it could, because there is almost like a playbook that MK Ultra, that religious abuse, that satanic ritual abuse, that there are certain patterns and certain like I said, it's just there are things that they do automatically to groom and prime children into being mind controlled adults, basically. And so it can be something that as you get to know it more and more, you can kind of see see the patterns there. And so outside of that, I just had myself. As I went along in my healing, and I'm going into the chronological things here in a minute, but as I went into discovering more and more, I was counseled basically to not talk too much about what my memories were, or what I was uncovering, or anything like that. And there was wisdom behind not talking about that, say, to my children, or too much to my husband, but really kind of keeping it close, because something that I had, I didn't know, but then later discovered, is the way the setup is, especially within, I was born into the religion of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and it's also known as the Mormon Church. It's the same thing. So I was born into the Mormon Church, born into this religion, and this religion it's set up to be very family oriented. And so a lot of my experience is within the church, high levels of the church, because I was actually delivered to the highest levels of the church. I interacted with, for those of the people that are actually familiar with this, the top 15 of the Mormon Church. And then also I have memories of just, regular family situations, and then being sold off into other private, ceremonies and rituals and things like that too. But because the setup is such, the way the secrecy is actually ensured so well, is if they'll pair people together, and like set up marriages, and that way they can access the children really easy, because the parents, say me and my ex-husband, we were both victims. Unknowingly, we'd repressed all of it. It was all amnesic, but the wedding was arranged, or the pairing was arranged, and because of that, it was really easy. They already knew how to control me and how to control him, so that access to the children was easy. And so that's a really common way that children are accessed, is because of this multi-generational training that is there. And wow, there's so much information. I'm just like, my mind just went, and this and this and this and this, I'm like, ooh, bring it back. So to get back into the chronology, most of my experience and my memories were through my dad's side of the family. And I was the oldest daughter of two oldest children. So even within that kind of a hierarchy, my birth order mattered. And so I was earmarked. I don't know all of the things that, they had kind of set aside, or what symbolically that meant to that particular family, but it did mean something, because if you're going to take it back in history far enough, like you just research the Bible, the eldest child matters, male or female, eldest child matters. And so being the oldest child of two other oldest children somehow factored into a number of the things that I was going to be trained in, or earmarked for, or labeled as, or that kind of thing. So I know that my dad's parents, so my grandparents, were also involved. My grandfather worked for the Union Pacific Railroad. He was a conductor on that railroad, and the railroad went from Salt Lake City to Los Angeles, or to California. The family, my grandparents lived in Los Angeles for a long period of time, and then eventually they were over in Salt Lake City, and they kind of went back and forth quite a bit. My dad was born and raised in Los Angeles, and my mom was born and raised in a little town in Utah called Clearfield. So it's just kind of north of Salt Lake, over by Ogden area. And that was a farm family. So she was the oldest of 11 children, and my dad was the oldest of 4 children. And they actually met when they were both serving Mormon missions, and they met in Germany. So they both went to Germany and met over there. And this will play in history, just basically the way the communication and the relationship between the Nazis and the experiments that they were doing on the Jews at the time, and how Project Paperclip comes into this, because as soon as World War II was done, and how, you know, the government basically brought these Nazi doctors over to Canada and the United States, and then kind of infiltrated them and brought them into a lot of the medical experimentations and this, different facilities supported by the government, supported by other wings of, what do I want to say, into medical, into government, into religious wings, so that there could be even more ability to continue these experimentations. And so I'm bringing that in because medical experimentation upon humans has not ended. It's still happening. And I have memories of that happening to me as a child as well. And this is where it's fascinating, because the different drugs that were used, I just remember coming away from a number of different sessions going, wow, the church actually knows more about drugs than the pharmaceutical companies do, or that doctors do. And then if you want to look at the way, you know, a lot of the stock holdings that the LDS Church actually has is within, you know, is in the pharmaceutical venue. And so they helped kind of create those. And I know that because I was part of that. So it's one of those things where the drug is whatever the cocktail is, whatever elements they're putting together. It's not just LSD, which, you know, was experiment. I mean, I as a child, I would that be given that drug, and there were other drugs that I don't know the names of. Maybe they have street names, I'm not sure, and maybe they just took those in combination with other things. But you got to remember that a lot of the children and people, and, you know, it's not just children. Here's where I really want to make it really clear: infants, toddlers, you know, young children, middle-aged children, teenagers, young adults into adulthood. You don't leave the system. You just don't leave the system. If they have you and you're being controlled, you're of value in some way. And just being able to direct the thoughts of a human has its own, in its own way, a lot of power intrinsic in it. I mean, there's, as you know, with all of the interviews you've done, there's something else beyond that as well. But it's a bigger organization. This thing has been going on for a very, very, very long time. And so when it gets into the religious side of it, that's where I have more of my experience. I don't necessarily have a lot of military experience, and I, you know, and there's other people that have other experiences that are like really heavy in one direction. Mine happens to be more heavy in the religious side of things, and specifically with the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints and the leadership there, and how that structure is formed. And so having that religion as a social structure that the families were involved in, and then also this the Satanic Brotherhood as also part of the structure and the guidance of it. If you are consciously involved in this deep dark brotherhood, this darker left-hand path is what it's called. I'm going to actually share with you some of the things that, you know, the more and more this stuff comes out, people will probably know, oh yeah, left-hand path, right-hand path. But and that sounds, you know, it's also very Masonic, but it's also even deeper than the Masons, right? It just kind of keeps going and going and going. So having that family history, I'm going back to my grandfather here. So he was part of the Union Pacific Railroad, and he was an engineer. And near the end of my healing process, I was able to have a very specific memory that he had orchestrated and he was in charge of. And it had to do with the murder of a little girl. And I was the bait, I guess that's the best way to say it. They had asked this little girl to keep an eye on me because I was younger. I think I was maybe 3 or something like that, 3 or 4, probably 4. And So I was kind of the bait, they had this little girl watch me, and I was told to go outside and find my grandpa. And so I'm not aware of anything. I'm just going looking for grandpa. She's following me because she's supposed to be watching me. And that's kind of the way there was basically they kidnapped her. They put her in a car. This was back in the early 70s, 1969, 1970 kind of era. And we were both drugged, and then I woke up in a warehouse, and she was already dead as far as I remember, but she was in front of me, and I could woke up and saw her face. But the reason I'm telling about this particular memory is, like, I got a lot of details of the way this whole thing went, and what they were doing to condition me to not to tell, by seeing this murder. Now, I'm telling you what I remember from it. It's possible that I did see the murder and then fell asleep, and then woke up to see this little girl that was dead. That's not part of what came forward, that when I was pulling that memory up. I just think the memory was trying to show me that, yeah, your grandpa's involved, and yeah, this has a lot to do with human trafficking, and they're sending messages. And somehow I was also associating it with maybe the robes they had on, which turned out to be Ku Klux Klan robes. So that was the one thing. So I'm just kind of giving you a slice. I'm just saying, look, there was a connection there that, without a lot of repeat memories, I could say, well, I mean, it's feasible that would be one of the ways that there could be some trafficking that was done. And because the one contact of my grandfather, who was the conductor, who's in charge of a number of different things, such as packages that come off and on the train itself, that would be a fairly easy setup, a fairly easy way to move merchandise, whatever that merchandise is. And that could be validated in a number of different ways, that of all the agencies and all of the companies that the brotherhood runs or owns independently. They do the same things, because they own trucking companies, they own farms, they own waste management companies, like all of these different things that you would not really start thinking about, that would be important to have representatives in, or ownership of, or have brotherhood together with, or whatever. It's going to be, I'm trying to kind of set a stage to say it's broader than what a person would want to think. And so it's a little shocking to think about, if you look around, how many people that you might wonder are victims of all of this. And there's thousands, hundreds of thousands of victims, honestly. But the other alternative, you've got to, like, the other side of this coin is how many perpetrators do you know? And I'm not saying that in a way to make you very scared or suspicious, but there are people that are actively involved now in these organizations, going to ceremony consciously and willingly, and being, are a part of this whole structure, that during the day, there's somebody you would never suspect. There's like, a school teacher, or the mailman, or somebody that's driving the garbage truck, or something like that. There's just all of these other areas that it brings it a little closer to home, because if you framed it as, oh, it's the government, kind of this nebulous thing, or this religion in this nebulous way, and it's out there, this kind of brings it in a little closer to say it's infiltrated humankind, it's here. And so people, again, I'm going to refer to the fact that we're always in this constant desire of healing, of like shedding the old and regenerating ourselves. And so it's not a place, I'm not trying to promote fear at all, because that's the level that this whole energy feeds off of, is the more you're afraid, and the more you're distracted, and the more you're kind of in your own frenzy, the easier you are to distract, the easier you are to, if you're quick to anger and you want to go storm the castle and like burn the whole thing down, and believe me, I did feel that way for a while. But being in that energy is that's such a volatile energy. It is a really controllable one, because if you're really, really on one extreme, it's easy to knock you off balance, versus kind of working on yourself and bringing yourself back down and being really solid and stable in knowing more and more about who you are, and react, or not reacting, but responding to things if you choose to respond. So anyway, I've got a lot of messages here I want to say, but anyway, so it is in my father's side. My grandmother was my grandfather. I did, because I was the oldest of these two oldest. I actually knew my great grandparents on both sides in a very interesting way. I remember sitting down as I don't know, probably, I want to say I was maybe 12 at the most, talking to my great grandfather and asking him a little bit about his life. I don't know. It was just kind of curious why, he was there in my grandparents' house. And I just kind of wanted to know a little bit more, right? Tell me about who you were. And he came across on the boat, like from England. And so there's this English side, and, that's about all I really remember of him. I don't ever remember seeing him in any ceremony or anything like that. But at that point, I don't know where it went past my grandparents, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And then on my mother's side, it's suspect to me. I had a couple of memories where there were some female interactions that were ceremonious, but they weren't with kind of the satanic ritual vibe or group that I was familiar with. So I still haven't gotten a lot of clarity on what that was. But it did come forward. And so there was something there that's it's never let me settle into, oh, my mom was not involved in this, or, whatever. And then later on, I found that there have been interactions, where she was actually involved with my dad in it, probably as a mental slave. I'm not 100% sure that that's the way it was, based on other testimony. The way this works, when you can start matching up people, and the way families can match up, marriages, they do that so they can access the children and keep that, propagating. And that is this case. That's what happened to my children. And once I discovered, seeing that as I was pulling out more and more information, that's when I cut off all relationship with both sides of the families, so that access was restricted. But I also put my children into therapy. It was kind of more of their own request, I have to tell you. That way we can talk about the way, family dynamics a little bit further into our conversations. But just know that it became really powerful for my children to be in a place where they could actually access memories or inner traumas and that kind of thing. And there were a couple of them that came forward and said, yeah, your mom was there as well as grandpa. And so, although I didn't have an awful lot of experience with my mom's side, I do know that they will divide up the children, and, one side will go to ceremonial with one, another will go to another, or they'll sell them off to somebody else, and that will be their handler venue, and it's not necessarily with the parents. So kind of just depends on the structure of how they divide up the family. Not every child is going to be accessed. It's purposeful in that way. And because of the purpose behind that, it also helps keep the secrecy and the level of protection for the group, the brotherhood group. I call it the brotherhood, we'll label it whatever we need to. But I do know, especially as you go higher up in the realms of the Mormon Church, the LDS Church, or just even higher up in the ranking of any of these groups, if a person, a couple, we'll just back it up. If, let's say, they have, 5 children, and they decide to test each of those children, it's really probable and possible that they only choose 3 of the 5 to take into ceremony. And then they will have the other two that never have any kind of experience with this. So if all three start getting memories, or two of them or one of them, if any of these other ones that have gone to ceremony have been, tortured and mind controlled, if their programming starts to break down, or if they start responding to what I call a self-elimination program, which is a lot of people end up killing themselves over it because it's self-elimination. Self-elimination also looks like becoming an alcoholic, getting drug addicted, living on the streets, something that is outside the norm of the family. And if one of those three comes back and says, dad has been doing this or grandpa's been doing that, the two that have never had any experience with it will have nothing that gets triggered, nothing that's, it's their sibling can look crazy, absolutely nuts. And then the parents who know how to play the children off of each other, let's say one of them is pointing fingers at the dad, the dad can turn to the other two and say, oh my gosh, I'm just heartbroken. How could your sister possibly say this about me? I just don't know. You guys know me better than that. They can really just kind of create this campaign to get them over to their side. And the other two are going to go, yeah, man, she's nuts. Like, what do we need to do? I don't know. Maybe she needs to be committed, or they can actually just go, oh yeah, that's the sister. She's off into her alcohol again, or whatever. They can really dismiss that. And the other two unknowingly are supporting the secrecy because they don't have any experience with it. So just because a family's involved in this Illuminati structure and this MK Ultra Satanic Ritual Abuse structure does not mean every single child is involved in it. And that makes it even harder to unpiece, because you can't look at the entire church and go, well, every single member is part of this, because they're not. It's really just trying to, like, you're going to have to, it's wheat and tares. They all look the same, right? But they're not the same thing. So anyway, I wanted to kind of bring that in where, yeah, it's been in my family, and it was definitely something that I was born into, and had handlers who were consciously manipulating, training, and exploiting me to get me to a place where I would dissociate. I would have personalities that could be called up and programmed. And all of this, again, follows a very like its own handbook, the MK Ultra handbook, in a way that, up until about age of 6, there's a lot of groundwork that's being laid, so that it ends up being that you've got like what do I want to call a commodity that can be offered to anybody higher up and move the family forward in a way that can benefit an individual or the family altogether. The whole idea is just moving themselves up in these organizations and gaining more and more power. So, do you have any questions so far?
Thank you for that. It's always, I think, a really big part of these stories is to understand the generational side, because that, if you haven't been born in one of those families, there might be some trauma that's passed down, but it can be a really hard concept for people to understand of like, well, how does that just happen to a person? It's like, well, it doesn't just happen. It's very
Right.
deliberate and it's orchestrated and
Right.
it's passed down and it's refined over time and it improves as far as the methods that they use. Like, it's very sophisticated and
Absolutely.
intelligent in a really sick way, so
Right.
I appreciate you sharing that, because on the outside, your family to everybody else probably looked very normal and,
Mm-hmm.
nobody'd ever know. They have regular jobs. They're doing just,
Mm-hmm.
they're in the community, they're going to church,
Yep.
and they'd never be able to tell, just like how you said, by, just looking and understanding that, oh, this person that I'm sitting next to in church is going home
Mm-hmm.
and, performing satanic ritual abuse on their granddaughter.
Right, right. Yeah, that I love that you're bringing words like sophisticated and well orchestrated. There's an intelligence and a very organized way that this is actually lived. And I think it feels better. We want it to be kind of sloppy and, like somewhere they're going to be messing up, and who does that, and that's gross, and they're off somewhere else in some like run down, I don't know, warehouse somewhere out on and you want it to be that way because it's almost like you can put it into something, some kind of a package that you can like really criticize or just kind of like dismiss or something. But the more and more you start realizing that no, they run hospitals and they run organizations, and they've been giving information to the pharmaceutical companies that which are actually distributing drugs to everyone else based on their own experimentation. Then it gets a little like that. Now it's close to home. Now you're like, wait a second, what? How is that? You're not talking about drugs on the street where it's just, yeah, those people, if they just wouldn't, take mushrooms and LSD and, like whatever catchwords, ecstasy, this or whatever. It's, you want to kind of like put it on a group, you want to categorize it and not be in that category so you can feel safe. And unfortunately, that's not the way this works. That is not an available situation, and I'm not trying to say you're not safe. I am trying to say, let's educate ourselves. And you will hear me always say, just keep looking at yourself. Just the more you study yourself, the more you look and heal yourself. If there, we all have trauma, the more you can free yourself from those things that are triggering and that they can really get reactions from, the more sovereign you end up being. Like you create more and more separation from the world they own. You're stepping out of it a little bit more and a little bit more, and it takes a minute. Like if you want to think about, gosh, if you're walking through like a swampy area or a bunch of mud or whatever, and you got boots on and you're walking, all of a sudden you're walking out of your boot, right? It just holds that on. This is not an easy thing to trod through, and we're in it. You might lose your boots a few times, then you lose your socks, you just got to keep moving forward because this is what we're living in. And they don't want the overlords of what this is. I don't know another way to say it. It's an overmind. It is, again, well orchestrated and highly connected. The more that we really empower ourselves and understand our own value and start to recognize what truly is choice and what isn't choice, but is framed as choice, but it's really good marketing. Even religion, even your own spirituality, even the way they, like if you're noticing as you get more and more aware of who you are, you're going to start seeing more and more, you're going to get this discernment of, oh, I'm being marketed to. Oh, well, yuck. Or I'm irritated it's marketing, but I kind of tend to agree with this. So I'm going to take this and do it like the way I know I can be integrous with. Like that's a whole different conversation, a whole different approach than just reacting and going, and this is the way it is, and blinders on or whatever. So again, like everything that I'm trying to share is like, look, I was in a really, really very highly traumatic, highly ritualized life. I healed myself out of it. I understand things that work well. I understand things that don't work so great. And I'm still in the process of always self-evaluation, always self-learning, always, like still more healing, but not from what it was that used to trigger me so much. And that's why I can talk about this so well, is the trigger points are not there anymore. The experience is still there. I can still reference it and I can still look at it and go, yeah, I understand. And yeah, I can validate you, but your story is not going to find a spot in me that is going to, trigger me. So if you want to think about like, oh, the old telephone operators, they had the big boxes and you have to put in the, plug in that, let me connect you kind of thing. Those connector ports are what I healed. So there might be, something that, wants to get connected in, but I don't have, it's like not having a helicopter landing pad. Like there's no place for this to land. And I will say, if something does, if there is something that lands or something that triggers me, now all of a sudden I'm like, oh, cool, I got something to work on. Like that, I can look at that. Now I know that that's really kind of an unusual situation versus, just being blind to myself the whole way. And I see so much value in the self work that I'm helping other people do, so that we empower ourselves more, and then we become more empowered as a community. Thus, the value of what you're doing here, just even giving people the space to say what they need to say and tell more of their story. So thank you for that. Anyway, so getting back to generational. Gosh, I haven't even been born yet, right? So, let me get here. Oh, wow. You did ask also, and it's really cool as far as my birthday goes. Was my birthday kind of like in a weird spot? And it was. So my birthday is near the vernal equinox. It's in March. When I got married, I also got married in March. Since then I've been divorced. I've been divorced for 12 years. But I also was married March 19th. So that's right close to that vernal equinox as well. I wanted to get married on the 20th, and for some, I don't know if it was a date or something weird, like, Friday, Saturday, whatever the day was, ended up landing on March 19th. And ironically, my husband at the time, his birthday is really close to the autumn equinox. So we were like right across, kind of as far as equinoxes go. I think it plays in. Might not, could be completely circumstantial. Typically, I would say that's not the case, but didn't get any memories specifically around that, to come forward and say, and here's why. That those kinds of ceremonies weren't necessarily part of my healing, although, like I said, there could have been ceremonies associated with that I cleared with clearing other memories. So I know that my birthday is around, like, yes, that does play in. And equinoxes are going to be just like the solstice, and the summer and winter solstice. Those are major dates that are going to have ceremony around them. They're going to have sacrificial, sexual, whatever, there's going to be certain ceremonies that happen around these turnings of the planet, and so my birthday, as being the oldest from two oldest, that kind of thing. I was born in 1966. That plays in somewhere there too. So it's just as far as, my individual experience, these things do kind of like line up. And when it comes to births and birth order, well, I won't say birth order, but births and pregnancies and child production, that kind of thing. The Mormon Church itself historically is very family focused, family oriented. And my parents, I was born in 1966, so that 50s, 60s era, the 60s, 70s, when they started really introducing families can be together forever. That was not an original Mormon like push that kind of came into the program as, I think it was David O. McKay that really pushed it. And Mormon people would know that he was a prophet. He was a president of the church at one point. And so that became more of a push, because what that could do is it could support the campaign that the church has to get its members to go to the temple. And you don't get into the temple unless you have a temple recommend. And the temple, right? Think about if you belong to a country club, it's a members only club, right? So to go into the temple, it's a members only club. It's a real parallel thing. So you have to pay your tithing. So you have to pay 10% of your income to be able to qualify to go into the temple. And then there's other questions and, things that you have to fulfill to be a member that would actually attend the temple. And this is what you want to do as far as the church is concerned. We want to get you in the temple. You're going to be part of the group, part of the club. That's where I was married. I was married in the Salt Lake Temple when I was married. And so in order to get into the temples, you show your temple recommend. And it's a, laminated piece of paper that has the signature of two authorities that are over you, So you're kind of your congregational leader, and then the leader in the hierarchy that's over about 6 other congregational leaders. So you're going to have these 2 signatures, because that means you've talked to both of them and you're like worthy to go to the temple. And so the setup is some, is set up as an achievement. You're wanting to move yourself towards more and more and more being and having this achievement. But it's also a great cover for the darker side of things, because it's a members only club. So when they have their ceremonies in the lower levels of this temple, it's pretty easy. You could actually enter in the front door of the temple, because you got your, even if you're going to go downstairs and you're going to do these really dark, heinous things, they have separate entrances. You come in from, tunnels and other building, other systems, like traveling systems. You can get in with that way, or you can even just walk through the front door with your temple recommend, because it's a members only building, right? You don't just walk in there as anybody going, I want to look at the paintings. So they've created a situation that to the members seems like an achievement, seems like it's, more of an elitist. This is what we're striving for. Here's how you're going to do this. And if you really want to make it to the highest levels of, heaven, this is how you're going to get there. You got to go to the temple. So for the membership going to the temple, you're going to start looking at others that are walking through that door in more of a righteous, positive light than a darker kind of, just regular person viewpoint. So even the illusion or even the setup of who goes into that building is already one of the layers of protection that they have of who's inside and what they're doing. Oh, it must be good. It must be righteous. It must be wonderful, because this is the way in the mind of a, regular attending Mormon person. This is how you're going to get to God. So it's going to be sacred and secret and quiet practices that they're not going to share out of those walls, because you have to qualify to get in there, right? So even the mental structure for for anybody is going to go, oh, this is a really, really special place. And so somebody like me shows up and says, no, I attended a lot of human sacrifice in the lower levels of that. They're going to go, what? You're up in the night? And I'm like, no, I'm here to tell you that happened a lot. And so they have all their private properties that, the church owns. And many of those properties, these kinds of ceremonies will happen. How that happened. I mean, I can kind of show you a little more structure and what that does. And there's also private places, private properties that they will outside, inside. There are houses up in the avenues part of the Salt Lake area that have tunnels between houses. So they will bring children for a birthday party, or people coming into another, like just so-and-so is throwing a party down the street, but that's not where they stay. They'll go down the basement to the tunnel across the street to this other house, or that public building, or that hospital, or that, like church house, or whatever it is. And it's not unusual as they're building up different areas for these groups to have tunnel systems between places, so that it's confusing to the victims. They went in one house and then they're having ceremony in another house, and wait a second, no, what, like it's just even trying to pull the recall is confusing. And it's done for safety reasons, but it's also done in a way that, pulling up anything else, it's really difficult to track. So let's see if there's anything else I'm looking at here. Oh yeah, I can. So from birth, being born into this well-organized system and a family that was actively involved in it, when I was born, the members of, it's not unusual to see 2 men in suits come into the hospitals here in Utah, really anywhere, as ecclesiastical or spiritual leaders, whether it's like a bishop and a counselor, or home teacher, or just any one of the male members that would want to come and give somebody in the hospital a blessing. So they're sick, or a baby's just been born, or whatever. So to see guys walking around in these suits, kind of a Men in Black kind of style without the sunglasses, it's not alarming. It's not an unusual thing, So I was born, and not long after my birth, and I'm talking days, I was pretty much claimed. They basically announced to my mom, she's ours. And then not long after that, in fact, my very first memory that I actually got when I went into therapy was me having a baby blessing. And they do this publicly out in, like in this normal Mormon, when somebody has a baby, they'll go present the baby to the congregation and give them a blessing. Well, I had a private blessing prior to the one that they were doing for the ward for the congregation, in my great aunt's house. And same kind of setup, but everybody's in, there's black candles and red robes and, weird stuff going on. And they're blessing me. And I remember being marked with something that felt wet, red, what would that be? Right. So then there's like this blood aspect that's there. And that was my first memory. And I left that session, and I, got it. Well, I'll get into that in a minute, but I left that session going, what was that? That's got to be symbolic, because I have no idea what I just saw, but I'll go with it because it's going to teach me something, I'm sure. Right. So that was my first introduction to, guess what kind of journey you're on. So there's a public presentation of what happens ceremonially, and then there's the private presentation that happens ceremonially, and it's the the white and the black, or the good and the bad, or the right hand and the left hand. It's always a dynamic that's both are present and both are happening. And that also adds to the layer of protection too, because even for me, in my conscious waking knowing life, I'm seeing one aspect of it, and yet another subconscious part of me has all of these memories of the same thing, but in a very gruesome, bloody way. And so I'm walking around as a child into adulthood with a lot of this dynamic that is actively acting in my life. And this darker side can get called up by my handlers at any time, because they know how I've been trained and what I've responded to. And so that can be accessed, whether it's through a key word or some drugging or just something shocking that's dissociative. There are ways that I was actively accessed up until I was 37 years old. Yeah, I was 37. And I got into therapy. And the reason I went searching for therapy is because I got depressed. And we'll talk about that at another time. Like, there was a definite triggering. I've now been able to track the trigger point of what initiated the depression. And it was also part of my programming. And it had been, oh my gosh, there was like 3 years prior, I had a dream, and it wasn't a dream, it was a memory, but I thought it was a dream. And so some of these things were kind of coming forward, but I just thought they were just these dreams. And I'd been living with this kind of weird dynamic through a dream for about 3 years, and then series of events. And anyway, it culminated in this depression, and I had dissociated. So I was kind of like dissociated in depression, watching myself in a way like, what is going on with me? And couldn't really, kick the apathy over anything. I was still a very active mom. I was not the kind that stayed in bed and just, I had duties to do, and I was very mechanical in those duties. But it was really scary to watch how I had a lack of enthusiasm for anything. And that's why I went to seek help, because I'm like, we got to get this depression thing taken care of. And so my intention when I got into therapy, or even prior to that, my intention was 100% what's at the root of this? Like, what is causing this depression? And that was the best question to ask. I wasn't trying to like, well, I got to get rid of this, let's cure it. It was more like, well, what's causing this? Like, kind of more of a curiosity. And my whole system was like, you ready? Off we went. And I just, it took months for me to just kind of go, is this for real? Anyway. So, really quickly, also, I was also part of gifted and talented programs. The way at 5 years old, the way I've told this to other, in other broadcasts, but the way I was actually picked to go up into the the upper levels of the Mormon Church was through a program on television at the time called Romper Room. And so there's people that was a programming aspect. So not every child, and I got to make this really clear, not every child that was on Romper Room was accessed, but every child on Romper Room was surveyed and studied and observed. So because, again, you're on television, right? And it was a 2-week period. So there was this experience that I had. I auditioned, and I remember, it was funny. I remember my mom getting the phone call and she was super excited. She's like, "Oh, she's going to be on Romper Room." And I'm like, "Cool. I get to see the magic mirror." That's about my own, 5-year-old association with, I'd been watching the program, and it just sounded fun. Right. So I was on the program and the filming was happening. And then afterwards, that footage was able, be accessed by the leadership of the church, because the leadership of the church actually owned the television station. So Bonneville Communications is owned by the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and they owned the television and the radio station KSL, and KSL is where Romper Room was. So it's not like, like there was a direct access point that, they whoever wanted to, that was part of the organization could use this program as a scanning tool or as a pre-screening tool for anything that they wanted. The thing that worked in my favor to be picked was I had already been born into a satanic ritualized, generational family. I had already been going through the training of dissociation and things like that. And so I'm on the program, and one of the leaders of the church wanted me. So that arrangement was made. And then from that point on, I was, anytime that a message was sent, a phone call was made, or whatever, "We need her up here," I would be taken up to the church administration building, and they would walk me inside, and I'd go up the elevator, and there I was. Or, somebody come downstairs and get me and take me upstairs. I was really uncomfortable with it. I hadn't, let's see, sometimes I would be given a drug prior, kind of like something to drink or a little sucker, or something. But every single time when I was up there with the men, there was always a candy dish of chocolates, and it was always chocolates. So, they had like a fondant or something inside that had these drugs in them. So they were given to the children there. And so now you're walking around in a state where you're under the influence of whatever drug. I mean, whether they wanted you to get, like pass out right away so they could take you right to ceremony, or if they just kind of wanted you in this, loopy state so that more could be administered later, or, there would be tasks or chores or things given, things for you to do, like even perform oral sex on somebody, while they're there in the office. Like, these things could happen because you got a piece of candy that was, putting you in that different state. Plus, if anything, code words, if there were things that you went through with training, that kind of stuff would also be really anchored in or referred to and accessed. And so that was from about, I would say 5 to, let's see, when did we move out of state? I want to say 15, about 9 or 10 years. I was within the vicinity of being accessed. And so for people that are familiar with Utah, when this first started happening, I lived in Salt Lake City from kindergarten to first grade. And then we moved to Bountiful from second and third grade. And then we moved to Ogden from fourth grade to ninth grade. And so on the Wasatch Front, I don't know what the mileage is on that, but that's kind of a span over different towns. And every single one of those towns had, well, you could drive to Salt Lake within an hour. So, that wasn't that far, but other major access points of gatherings and groups and that kind of thing. So, I was in the circuit, and I was in the training from 5 years old with the church. Family activities, family ceremonies were also happening at the same time. because I had younger siblings, I had younger cousins. I was reinforcing my own training. I had specific training because I had already now I was in the track to go into the church. And as I got older, they were putting me into a grooming pool to be part of the leadership of the church. I was going to be in a pool that they could access. Doesn't mean I was going to be a leader. Doesn't mean anything really. It just means that I could be again accessed and chosen if I fit whatever it is they were looking for. Did they want a particular image? Did they want a particular bloodline? Did they want a particular association? Who was I connected to? Who would I have been married to? Like it just, what's my criteria, and really, if you want to think about yourself as some kind of a, oh, I keep thinking cattle, like because the church is in charge of this group's breeding program, breeding meaning human aspect of the breeding program and the financial aspect of the money laundering and all of the other things that work with that whole organization. It's like you have a file or a tick list. This is who her pedigree is. This is, all of these things. And so that would be true for a lot of the people that are actively being utilized or could be referenced or used, whether it's to reproduce, be part of a breeding program. They need your body. They want your DNA. They need you to carry something, or whether me being female, or whether they want your sperm if you're male, if they just need you as a body so that you could be, utilized, abused, murdered, whatever. There's what's the word? It's criteria that they look for. And if you fall in a particular criteria, you're available to be used. So.
Thank you for all of that background. It's so complex how all of this works. I love how you're helping outline how these different institutions, how these different communities connect, and how this is able to function as an orchestrated unit in a sense, whether it's in a town or whether it's, across the world. Because that's also really hard for people to conceptualize. And unless they listen to an explanation like what you just gave, it can be very elusive. Like, well, what do you mean? That
Yeah.
the church is connected to a pharmaceutical company, or, that the Freemason Lodge is connected to my church somehow. Like these connections, everything is so separate in the public eye. We're taught that everything is so separate, right? Even down to how things work in a court system, that a lawyer works separately. They just go in and show up and they're advocating for our best interest. They don't have any connections to anybody else in the court. We
Right.
see everything really separate and we don't see the big picture of like, no, there is an intelligent system working with very resourceful,
Right.
connected
Right.
people, and they're doing something behind goodwill. They look good, and they have their titles, and they show up, and because they have their titles and their degrees and whatever else, their credentials, we respect them, and we don't question a motive that could be going on. And
At
so,
all. Yeah.
right.
We've already been told as a society, we've been taught in the systems that we live, school, society, all of it, we've been taught what certain things are. So there is a blueprint or an overlay or a framework that we expect to be functioning in the manner we were told it is. This is the mail system. It will do X. This is the legal system. It will do this, like we want things to function and we want them to be clean because we want to trust it. So the idea that one's going to overlap with the other is really, it's confusing and it's frustrating. And then it's offensive if you find out, this is where kind of outrage. Oh no, that person shouldn't be, doing this. This is nepotism. They shouldn't be hiring their son to do, what you get angry because you want it to be clean. And we've been told it should be clean, so we have already been given the structure or the lens through which we should view this whole system. And we're like, okay, sure, you betcha, we like it. There's no reason for you to question it. But then it gets confusing if you, let's say, enter the legal system, that example that you brought up, and you get assigned a lawyer, but that lawyer knows that your parents are part of this thing and you're also, a victim, and they have an ulterior motive. They're having other meetings about what needs to happen here. And you're trying to, like gain property rights to something, but they don't want you to have it, or they do. And, whatever their motive is going to start playing into this unbeknownst to you, because you don't matter other than you're the face. And what do they want to do with you? There was this reminds me, there was a case out here in Utah where a gal, she I don't remember the years. I think it was back in the 80s. Anyway, so when you're going to go on a Mormon mission, then you go to what's called the Mission Training Center in Provo, and they've got other ones. One's in Mexico City, and I think there's another one also. But these young men and yet these young women, they're 18, 19 years old. They will go to the Mission Training Center, and if you're going to go somewhere foreign, you're going to learn the language, and then they're going to, like send you out to the country you were sent to, or you're just there to learn what, kind of how you're going to start knocking on doors, and they're going to give you some training before they put you out there. Thus, the Mission Training Center. Well, the president of the Mission Training Center back in the 80s, if I'm correct on the timeline, was abusing what's called sister missionaries. There were some girls that were missionaries that were there that he targeted and then would take downstairs and into this secret room. Well, it looked like a broom closet from the outside, a keyed entry broom closet, but it was an entire room where he had a bed set up and other things like that so that he could molest them. I'm going to use the word molest because I don't have the details of exactly what happened. Anyway, one of these girls, as an adult, mic'd herself, went and found him, had an interview for, he's in his 80s, and she point blank asked him why he did it, and he confessed. And she has it on tape and, like on the recording, and he was apologizing, and there was just kind of this back and forth that actually happened. And she actually did this GoFundMe campaign, like, look, I've got evidence. He admitted to it. And he was high level in the Mormon church kind of person. And I was interested in this case because I'm like, oh, I wonder what the 12 are going to do about this guy. Are they going to defend one of their own? And publicly they didn't. But what did happen is a massive smear campaign happened to this gal where they were like, oh, she's been in and out of, drug rehab, and she's not reliable this way. And they just kind of brought out all of these really negative things, may or may not have been true, probably were. Like, if you're going to have the worst things that, you're like, as a human, things, they dug this stuff up. And they were putting that in front of everything. They were like superseding it. So you're kind of like, yeah, did she really? Maybe she asked for it, some of that old programming. And so it ended up going to court, and all of those proceedings really didn't get a lot of media attention, if any. It just kind of started to get on, like be pushed over to the side. So if you want to find it, you can go find it. You can actually type it in, Mormon Church, MTC president accused of molesting girl. They even found the secret room. They went and investigated it, and they found the room in the MTC, in the Mission Training Center. So she's got all of this stuff saying this happened, and it just kind of found its quiet way off the stage in a very real way. Like, it kind of blew up, and she even, like she campaigned, and there were a lot of people behind her really trying to bring this forward. But it's the presidency of the church is not going to come out and publicly address something unless they want to really just guide people away from or towards something. But it's going to get some attention. They just have other ways that they ignore things that they don't give word or notice to, and then other stuff happens on the side, and it goes away, at least from the public view, right? So having like, even having the idea that different agencies cross over or anything like that, as much as we want that to be clean, it just isn't. I'm trying to remember where I wanted to go with that comment. It help direct me. Do you have any questions on that one? Where were we going? It just kind of got diverted.
We were discussing your childhood again, and sort of talking about how they were grooming you to
Right.
sort of an authority position in the church.
Okay. Yeah. Basically, I wanted to bring in the fact that there are things that do happen that do, kind of come on scene, and then they just find their way going away. So starting with me, so much of my life I felt was just normal. Like you said, we were talking about earlier, our family would have looked like just any other family on the block. We weren't extra wealthy. We weren't poor. We were just a normal American family. And yet there were activities and things that would happen that I guess in my growing up, I thought were normal for people. But one of the ways I wanted to go back to this early childhood, one of the ways that the programming that they did, or the dissociating and the training that I would underwent would be like having anal rapes. And so the anal rapes would be like if you were going to change my diaper, and my grandpa or my grandma, my grandpa's at usually work, but my grandma or whoever, my dad, whatever, would take that opportunity to rape me, and with, you know, the finger raping. So what that does is it starts from like the way your brainstem and the nerve endings on your tailbone, the way they're connected, that kind of I've got the word vulnerability. That's what I want. Violation. That kind of violation actually does something to the nervous system. And I read an article where it's actually was talking about how that affects your brain stem, affects the base of your brain, to where the brain responds, especially early, where it kind of bursts, and then it has all these little nodules that come from that impulse, that rape, that pain, you know, that kind of thing. And each of those little nodules could actually be a place where it could later be accessed. If I'm remembering this article right, I really want to find it, but we can reference it in the notes. But it was something that can contain or can be a repository for a different personality. So it's a physical manifestation of creating different locations or nodes that could hold different consciousness, I guess is the best way to put it. So multiple personality disorder isn't necessarily a disorder. It is a result of trauma, right? So once you have like you've gone through that training, this is one of the reasons why as you get older and you dissociate, different programs or different trainings, different traumas, different personalities can actually be created by the group and by the handlers that will find a place to be stored. So it's in trauma brain where all of it's happening, but the storage of it, there's actually room for storage of this because of this early on anal violation that's happening. So there's a physiological part of this that's actually going on. So having that happen and being picked from romper room made it easy, like I was just like, yeah, I want that child. And so I would go up to the church office buildings, and at 5 years old, I would be part of different ceremonies, whether it was just a private ceremony where there was they would go down into the tunnel system, and there was this one room, again, looked like a broom closet, key entry kind of idea. And it was, he would open it up, and it was just like kind of a single use thing that wasn't, like there's a great big pentagram on the floor, and there's melted candles, and there was things on the walls and that kind of thing. And I would be laid in the middle of that, and then he would rape me and say whatever, chants or things that he wanted to say, be done. And then I'm cleaned up, and then we're walking down the tunnel to go do another thing. So it's kind of like a pre-rape to another one that's coming forward. So it's a systematic thing, but a lot of the experiences that I had, I mean, I saw other children up there. I watched as, like I was present during meetings that would mean nothing to me, but people that I could later identify coming in and out of these offices or down in ceremonies. So from about 5 up, like I said, up to about 14, 15 years old, these would be things that I was actually present at because I had been chosen earlier to be part of these ceremonies. And so I'm trying to think on the side of just the family, just a family thing. My dad, in these cases, I'm thinking of my dad. I know my grandma arranged some things as well. There was this time, I think I was probably about, I want to say 9 or 10, that my dad, I remember the house. So this is why I remember the house. He called me out to the front yard, And I came out, and I remember it being a bread truck, like an old delivery bread truck. And there was this bread truck parked out in front of our house. And I was like, yeah, what do you need? And these men got out of the truck, and I was confused. Like I just didn't really understand but they were coming towards him, not super aggressively. They were just walking up to him. And one of them handed him some money, and the other ones put this like cloth canvas bag over me, and picked me up and threw me in the back of the truck. And then we went off to ceremony. So just even like, it sounds really weird, but like in daylight, in broad daylight, like that happened, but there was nobody else on the street. They probably had like watchers on either end of the street. It was a very short street. And then I also know that there were other members of the satanic group that lived on that road as well. So I mean, nobody's really going to have too much attention that they're going to see. But anyway, yeah, off in the red truck. That was one way I was transported. I was transported in a hearse a number of times, where they would put me in a casket and then drive me across town. So that's not going to call any attention either. And then through tunnel systems, that was one way to move around and move people around. I'm trying to think, there was one other I was going to tell you about as far as transportation goes. Oh, I just had it, but I'm forgetting about it right now.
Well, while you're thinking of that for a second, could I ask you, I know a lot
Yeah,
of what you went through took place in these tunnel systems related to the community in your church. Were you taken
sure.
outside of Utah or the central areas? And what were some of the other locations that you would be taken to for your abuse?
Yeah, my abuse, like very key places, we did a lot of moving around. So California, have memories of being abused in California. The one that was really, well, one or two, I mean, I had a number of memories at this place. I was trying to identify the building, but I went there as like a kind of as a daycare. It was like a daycare facility. I guess that I just remember there being a really big star on the side of the building, and it looked like a sheriff's badge. That's about the best way I could describe it. But anyway, I feel like the building was kind of a dual purpose building. But this was in California, and this whole entire place was set up to terrorize children and program children. So different rooms, we would go into different rooms for initial play, and then they would like bind us together or whatever, and put us through these really terrifying tasks. If there was one time, there was a little boy that was introduced, and I think there was like another room that didn't have carpet. It was more like they had tile on the floor. It was more like a kind of it reminded me of like what you would see in an old hospital room, like that old tile and stuff. And we had to go through a series of exercises, and they were building up a lot of like anger and trauma. And we'd been given snack before, so we were all again under some kind of influence of a drug. And turned out that this little boy was sacrificed in front of all of us. And he wasn't really, he was new, new to the group. So it's like, we're welcoming him or whatever, like he's new today. And then they ended up killing him in front of all of us. And so it wasn't that he was there for any other reason other than to drive home trauma. So I had experiences a number of times in California, mostly through Utah. We moved to Texas, El Paso, Texas, had a really huge experience in just across the border in Mexico. And that was done through the church. The stake president that was there at the time, meaning he was, again, like higher level local leadership, his family owned a lot of property in Mexico. And they had created a great big ceremony out in the desert out there, where they had flown in some dignitaries and high level officials, and really big kind of well, there was a really, really impressive, very terrifying sacrifice that happened there. With a 16-year-old girl. I believe she was about 16. And then there were other girls that were brought there along with me, that were there just purely for being traumatized, but then also as entertainment, or just there to be sex kittens, whatever you want to call it. We were there for the sexual pleasure of the people that were, or the men that were there. The interesting thing about how we arrived there was that weekend had been set up in the ward as, or in the stake, actually. So it was a bigger kind of, it was still the church gathering. They brought together the young women, and they were doing a young women's sleepover weekend at our church, at our ward. And previous arrangements had been made with a particular member of the church that owned a truck, like a semi truck. And his job was to bring his semi, but he had found, or had rented a refrigerated trailer that was used for hauling sides of beef, so a meat trailer. And the way they got us across the border, or the way they transported us to that location, was we were at that activity and then had dinner, and dinner was drugged. And so those who were chosen to go out to this ceremony for the night basically passed out, and they put us in these big meat sacks, and then they hooked them up in the truck, so we looked like sides of beef. And they put us near the front, and then they hung the real frozen beef at the back. So if they would have gotten stopped, and they would have done this, also arranged it so any kind of border patrol who would be part of the whole group would actually be the border patrol on that night, so just to let the truck through. And then the whatever the time frame was to get to the location, and then offloading us, letting timing the drugs so that we would be then waking up on location. And they just got the whole thing, the whole event was going as basically they planned it. And part of the purpose of this whole ceremony was to, what they call, open the border between the US and Mexico in that area, not just for trafficking, but for some kind of a deal, some kind of a unification of like, I don't know if you want to call mafia groups, how they make deals. It was kind of a similar thing, so that there could be some similar use of that land for satanic ritual purposes, and for other purposes such as human trafficking and that kind of thing. So it was a ceremony specifically to dedicate that land. And I'm talking thousands of acres, if I understand right, like lots of land specifically for this union. And they sealed it with the sacrifice of the blood of this 16-year-old, who happened to be, I think she was an adopted niece or an adopted member, just a member of the family of the guy that owned the land, who happened to be the state president, kind of the area authority. So that was sealed with her blood. And I found out later, in some really weird chain of events, that somebody that I knew that family. And I had asked, I says, hey, was there ever like a girl when they lived over there, was there a gal that died? And they said, yeah, as a matter of fact, it was really tragic, because she was out riding fence line. It's a big ranch. She was out riding fence line with, this guy, the dad, or, her uncle, the guy that I knew. They were riding fence line, and the horse spooked, and it bucked her off, and she was impaled on a fence, and it killed her. And it was like, yeah, no, that was not a fence. That was a sword. I watched that happen. I didn't say that to them, but it was a dagger, right? And it was one of those things where I watched the sacrifice, and like, it was the coolest miracle in a way to settle things for me, because I was trying to figure out how that whole thing went down. So the way it went was, gosh, I talked about this on another broadcast that I was on. And it's really one of the most disturbing ones that I'd ever seen, because I was about the same age as that girl. I was 15 when I was on location with this, and this girl, when they got to a certain point of really dedicating, and there was three men that were standing behind. I'm telling you, they brought in like it glamping, like these massive tents, and when I'm saying dignitaries, I'm not kidding. They were very, very real, presidential dignitaries that were there. And there was this big stone altar that had been brought in. And these three men, one of them was the guy that owned the land, and then a church, LDS church official who's no longer alive, but one of my perpetrators. And then another guy, I don't know who he was. He was probably the guy that they were making the connection with from Mexico. They were standing behind this altar, and they were calling in like very, very demonic forces. Like I was watching some things that were really kind of hard for me to like process, because again, drugs and everything, but they were worldly and otherworldly. It was really intense. But they got to a certain point where, as the crescendo of what they were saying and yelling and chanting and just bringing forward and bringing up, as it got to a certain point, they stopped, and there was this kind of this pause, this hush, and this girl came out of this tent, and she looked absolutely beautiful. She had this long, I remember, kind of long blonde hair, white gown kind of thing. And she walked over, definitely in a daze, but she walked over, got up on the altar herself, and then she was handed a dagger by the guy in the middle. And they started, like speaking again and again, and they allowed this to build up. And at one point, she took the dagger and plunged it into herself. And then, they kind of finished her off, whatever needed to happen to really have that blood spill. But she initiated it. And that just, it leveled me, because I couldn't figure out, even when I was getting the memory, it's like, oh, how did they do that? What in the world? Like, I just hadn't understood in the process of getting this particular memory, the extent of mind control that really they had. But then I also discovered later that there is a particular drug that is used that you do lose all kinds of sense. You just follow orders. You don't have any other sense of self. You're given instruction. And when, and you're told, when this is said or when this happens, this is what you do. And you can't stop yourself. But you're also not in this certain circumstance I'm talking about. She was not in any kind of awareness of self-preservation. There was just none of that there. And the demonstration was super effective. Like, right after that, there was it just kind of erupted into, orgy and other kind of celebrating. It was confusing and horrifying all at the same time. And it was a lot on my system. And I remember actually checking out. I remember kind of like part of me just went, I'm out. I just kind of left my body. That dissociation was really severe. And thank goodness, through my processing, I was able to remember that and kind of like restore that, and kind of, not kind of, but basically become more unified again, integrate that back in. But oh wow, that was a huge one. And and that's when I was 15 years old. I went through a lot of series of experiences in my lifetime that ranged anywhere from camping trips where I was gang raped, but ceremonially, to being put in morgue drawers and programmed in there because they had access to the hospital, to sitting in the back seat of a dignitary's car as I was driven up to a different office so that I could be used as a gift later, and even a secret signing between a high-level official of the Mormon Church, and what I later learned was a pope. I just thought he was a cardinal. I don't know, but I know that what happened, I was present at, and I know which, which pope it was, and I know, like I was there, and that the room that they did it in was in Salt Lake. It was underground. We accessed it from the tunnels, and I remember there was a little boy in there too. So it was kind of like the Mormon Catholic thing. So there was 6 Catholic children and 6 Mormon children. And the 2 at the front, I was at the front, and this other little boy was at the front. We went in as the innocent witnesses of the signing of this document. And it was dark enough that it looked like the ink they were using was black, but it wasn't. It was blood. So they were signing this document in blood, and they were rolling it up on a what looked like a papyrus, or like a natural kind of scroll. Could have been something that was natural fibers, could have been human skin. I didn't know at the time. I couldn't tell exactly, but that was sealed. Agreement was made. That was early 70s. And I was always raised to think that the Mormon and Catholic Church were not, they had absolute zero crossover. But I was in that experience, in that ceremony, where that I watched those documents, or that document being signed. And I remember exactly who the people are that made that pact or that agreement, whose signatures are on that paper. I remember the rings, and I remember the Pope, and I was the gift to him. So they exchanged the children. So he wanted a female, and he wanted, according to him, a feisty one. So I did have these moments of fighting back. So I was kind of known for that in some really weird way. So I was raped by this Catholic cardinal who was at the time a pope. And this little boy was raped by the Mormon representative, who happened to like little boys. And then after they sealed that part of that ceremony, then the other children came in, and the other men that were there also each had a child that they were finalizing that whole ceremony and that agreement over, just kind of trading back and forth with the children. So that was like in downtown Salt Lake proper, underground, on private property, on the church property, within that tunnel system that's there. And people need to know that the tunnel system is layered. Like, if you are a church employee and you're like, I don't know what she's talking about because I've walked that tunnel, 1,000 times. Most of everything I'm telling you are at levels and layers that you don't have access to. Like, these are deeper. These are layers that are deeper. And the architects, I mean, they're working on the old temples now. They're the one in Salt Lake, they're retrofitting. If you want to look this up, if you want to get on Google and see what the construction of the Salt Lake Temple looks like right now, I mean, they have ripped up massive amounts of land. They've torn down old buildings. They have dug down, I don't know, stories and stories and stories of ground. And from what I understand, they're building more ceremony rooms, and they're telling the public that it's just to kind of earthquake proof the temple or whatever. And I'm going to highly disagree with that. They're one of the things they do need to do is make sure that their HVAC system is pretty up to date and really, really high level, so they can pump air through all of the tunnel systems. They can actually ventilate any smoke that comes from, like, they have torches down there. I mean, they make it look really medieval, and they're able to keep that air circulating to get any smoke out, any incinerator from, getting rid of bodies, any kind of, like, they're going to have ways to wash blood away that, is not also going to be publicly detected. They keep it all in-house. And so they're just updating things. And then the other thing that I am 100% of the opinion of is the renovations that the LDS Church is doing to these original temples, like these really, some of the first temples they ever built, like the Washington, D.C. temple, the Salt Lake temple, Logan, Manti, St. George, so they tore down Ogden and Provo. But anyway, some of these really old ones, people my age are starting to get memories. They're starting to kind of come forward. The programming is like, it's not only kind of breaking down, but there's also more energy of truth coming forward. So whether or not you're actively trying to seek this out, it's kind of like that truth wave, that energetic truth, of what really is affecting a lot of people. And so they're having memories of abuse in certain areas, especially of the temples. And had they not gone back through and done their renovations, I could probably have walked you through a lower tunnel system, a lower level system, and taken you to particular rooms, because I'm really good at underground directions. Go figure. And I'm certain other people are as well. And so having those kind of breaches has been being tracked. And so they're doing something about it. They're renovating all of these old places where they were doing so much ceremony and so much sacrifice and so much traumatization. And again, a crossover, one of the ways that I know that they were tracking this is every once in a while, people will come forward and say, they will have these memories, or they will have something that is actually physically happening. And one way or another, they start reporting it, and it's going to go to local police authorities. I know of one case where it actually went as far as the FBI, and then up to the Homeland Security that's local here. And more and more people, like, there was just kind of this call that went out, like, if kind of start reporting. What I personally think is they were gathering a lot of data, and they were saying, okay, a lot of these reports are coming in, these particular people are being named, or these locations are being named. I just feel like they've got so much information, and people are following the track of what again, it's like, well, I'm going to go report it, and the authorities should do something about it because church is different than state. And it's like, no, they're the same thing, actually. So you're just letting them know what you know. And so word is getting back to, apparently in this particular case, it's getting back to the organization. It's like, look, we've got this data, this age group is breaking down, this wave is coming forward, and we're just gonna change some things up, make it more state of the art, make it more refined, and make it so it's brand new and different for, like, again, I can't take you through anything now and so there it is, and there it is. They could have changed a lot of access points from now to, from then to now too. So it's, they're messing with the crime scene, and they can. So
100%. Yeah. And then if you're disclosing in other people, then they can say, oh no, you're wrong. The design looks like this. It doesn't look
yeah,
like this anymore. It's like
that's
they're
not how it is.
gaslighting you.
100%. And as a victim that hasn't done a lot of work or doesn't have a lot of information, it's easy to gaslight yourself. Oh, maybe I'm a nightmare, like, you just, because you also don't want it to be true. I'm going to tell you, when I started pulling up my memories, and it started really showing me, no, this was your life, this is what you were, going through. I was all about denial, like, there is a period of time where you're just like, no, man, who does that? So a lot of grief going on that way. And it started out with family, and then it went into showing me church, and I had to go through that whole grief thing. And then eventually I started like really putting my story together, and I was like, wow, this thing is everywhere, and I don't know who to trust. And I just lost my family, my church, I lost all it. Feels very isolating, really, really isolating. And that's one of the rules that this whole organization does. If they can split you off, then you're not even whole in yourself, and you're going to feel isolated anyway. And if you're walking around suspicious because of just what's going on inside of you, now you're not trusting other people. So the more you can be isolated, the more that you can be controlled. And so the isolation, I noticed in your prayer, I wanted to bring this up, and I thought this was really great when you were saying anxious thoughts. If I could, I'm going to have to look up the specific scripture, but I know that the apostles were asking Jesus how to pray. And one of the things that he told them is, like, get rid of your anxious thoughts. Well, anxious thought in Greek, it basically means divided mind. And I was like, oh my gosh, Oh my gosh. So if you want to take it as, like kind of layperson, yeah, be unified in your in who you are, be unified in your intentions. But if you have multiple personalities, you've got, these breakoffs, these split offs, man, you're that's going to be a task. Your job is to bring all of those together and integrate. And it's frustrating to me because there are a lot of it is of some mental health camps that it's best just to cope. You're never gonna, don't worry about integration, you just need to learn, here's some tools, here's some drugs, here's some things for you to cope. And for some people, that is actually the most beneficial way for them to live a very fulfilling life. And for some, that's not that fulfilling. That's not what they want. For me, it was a deep inner drive to not only rid myself of what I became, that I termed the black goo, because that's what it felt like and looked like inside of me, but it was horrible. I really wanted to bring myself together. I wanted me to be full and whole. So that was my intention, right? And so I've been able to do that in a very, very huge degree. That's a lot of what it is my experience has been and what my motivation has been. So yeah, having this divided mind, even being in division in a lot of ways, you got to start here again, bring it back, and see what it is that's divided within you, see where your fractures are, and make yourself, give yourself a really active intention with that. So you have any questions at this point? I want to
I
like
just
pause for a minute.
No, I just want to thank you for sharing all of this. It's neat how you're sort of balancing. I like how you sort of compared it to kind of duality. There's kind of like the light side and the dark side. You're doing a really good job sort of illustrating the darkness, but then complementing it with how you've healed from it and what you've learned from it, and it's really beautiful how you're able to kind of mix that for us so we can sort of see the whole picture of, what this is, how it affects somebody, but also that it's possible to overcome it and to have a fulfilling life despite, going through things that are so horrible.
Right. Yeah, thank you for saying that. I actually have some things that I want to share with everybody just to really illustrate um, real time how this actually does work, and then know how it gets, I will tell you that it gets reinforced at home because everybody's in kind of a partnership. There's a single goal to keep a victim under control. So you're going to have the victim, you're going to have the handler of the victim. In my case, it was my dad, and there were others that were also my handlers. And then he would have handlers. So it just kind of keeps going up the line. Also, just for clarity, you can also have handlers that are not consciously aware they're handling you. So simple thing would be like, let's say my sister and I were going to go out somewhere. My dad has control of both of us, right? And him just taking my sister aside and saying to her, make sure she doesn't talk to that person, or let me know, about this or that or whatever. Like he would frame it perhaps for her in her unique groomed way that she would consciously or unconsciously report on me when she got back. So that's a form of also of handling. You can have a best friend, or I don't know, somebody that you just totally trust and you tell everything to, that may consciously or unconsciously also have this in their history. Because I mean, that happened to me in high school. Like I had new girl moves into town, my parents or my dad's like, we're going to get you guys together because she's lonely, right? Both families are involved. Like, I don't know this, but both families are involved. And so we were paired together and we did become really good friends. And I would watch, she would actually have some kind of episodes every once in a while where I thought it was weird. Things that she liked, I thought were a little gruesome. There were some telltale signs that I can look at now and go, ooh, that fits. But I had no idea. But then I would also, what did you and she do today? Or what happened when this, or what did she say there? And I had the programming where I I had kind of a photographic memory for conversations. And so I could record conversations verbatim, and then I could repeat them even a couple weeks later again verbatim. Like I could, and I watched myself do this. I thought it was kind of a superpower. It's like, God, I got a really good memory here. But I was a really good reporter in that way. And so that's another program that every victim has inside of them, is a recorder part, where they're recording everything. It doesn't mean that they will be able to report it quite, unless you get trained in that skill, I guess, but you will be able to tell. Like, so you're going to take in the information and then you're going to report the information. So as I was going through my healing process, it was really clear to me that anything that I would tell, like say my sister, my siblings, right? I also knew that since they weren't in an awareness or any kind of a healing process to exit the system, that everything that I would say could be potentially reported back. And so I was also very cautious, especially as I, was even so now a little bit. I'm not so like cautious anymore, as far as like, oh, they're gonna, I already know that if I'm being tracked, I'm being tracked. I don't have to worry about that. But just knowing that anything that I'm going to be sharing with siblings is going to be, or could potentially be, reported. And so that is something in my education, as my healing, that, oh, there's things I'm not going to be sharing at all. There are things that I'm not even going to be truthful about. I might, if I've been on vacation and happen to talk to somebody, like my sister or whatever, and she's like, where did you go? If it feels appropriate, I will give her a whole different location. Like it's the game they play. It's a disinformation, no information game that this satanic blood brotherhood plays. You can't expect to be told the truth. That's not the way they play it, unless it plays into their favor. So anyway, I'm looking at my notebook over here. Yeah, okay. I feel like it's good. In my process, I was actually today getting ready for this interview, and I just was going back through my notes of my sessions, because I've recorded them, and I wanted to bring something forward that was going to be really appropriate for this. And so I want to read to you a section of what my memory recovery session looked like. And this is really raw. So, but I think as you get going along, I might, yeah, there's going to be like, I'm going to read to you exactly how I was remembering it. So I'm going to move this back here and get these pages. Hold on just a minute.
Thank you so much for doing this. I think it's
Yeah.
a lot of times when we hear about these stories, it's after the survivor has come to a place of healing where they can sort of add more context to it. And I
Mhm.
love like being able to showcase some of that raw emotion of kind of what it's
Yeah.
like at the moment, of discovery. So I appreciate you sharing some of your vulnerability with us.
Yeah, I appreciate you saying that. This is whew, one of the best ways to do it, honestly. Okay. So just to give you some context and a setup, when I would do my sessions, um I worked with a psychotherapist who specialized in, I found out later, helping people that come from satanic ritual abuse. I had no idea what that meant. I didn't even know what SRA meant. I was just like, nah, I'm depressed, and whatever this is, we got to figure out this out. Um, so I filled out his form, like the first interview, I filled out his form, and he looked at, my answers. I'm just filling it out, and he said, yeah, I think I can work with you. And I'm like, cool. How long is this going to take? My head, how long until I get better? Right. How long is it going to take me to get over my depression? And his comment was, well, let's give it a couple months and we'll see. And what I heard him say was, let's give it a couple months. And in my, I'm like, oh, and then I'll be done. Cool. I can do this. I can do this for a couple months. And I wanted to keep it secret. And I'll tell you why. I'm going to write this down. I will tell you why I wanted to keep it secret, because it was mortifying to think that I was going into therapy. Like that was just a bad thing in my whole system, in my whole psyche. So I'm writing myself a note to remember. Okay. And I'll tell you why, because there was definite programming around keeping it secret, which is also a little bit beyond the regular secretive programming. So, all right. So basically when I would go into my therapy, it was not traditional hypnotherapy. It was going into a very deep, relaxed state. The therapist was a traditional psychotherapist, had his PhD, and then also did some training in hypnotherapy and found that it was massively effective with his clients. And so it's what he did. And I wasn't afraid of it because I was like, well, that's how I do all my past life regressions. Of course, I get what you're talking about. I am not afraid of this. And I'd been doing past life work, kind of dabbling in it with with a friend of mine. She and I were kind of exploring past life experiences just to kind of see what that was all about. We'd been doing that for about 3 years before I hit this massive depression space from a whole different trigger, and sought out help. And so when this was brought forward, I also knew how effective it was, and I was not afraid of it. I do need to drop this in right now. There are therapists that will use hypnosis to negatively impact and access their clients. And a lot of times it's because their clients are coming in with massive trauma, and they already know that. And so they know how to take advantage of their clients. That was not my experience, nor was it my case. And you got to remember, there's both. There's those that are going to use it and exploit you, and there are those that are going to have it as an offering that can be used to help you. And luckily, in my case, it was wildly effective in changing behaviors, in all kinds of healing. So I am a big fan. It is probably the most effective method that I've ever seen. Probably the reason why they have so much contrary press about it, with false memory syndrome. I can't bring, like anything that's recovered through hypnotherapy into court because they've ruled that out. Like they've really stacked it against this really effective methodology. And there's reasons, because you get really deep. And I'm going to show you how good, how effective this was. So basically it's me and my therapist. I had been tape recording all of it, and then I transcribed it, and I've got this on paper here. And so I'm just going to read what that session looked like. So let's see, I'm going to start. Okay. I said, I'm feeling waves of nausea. Also, by the way, when you're in these things, your body again wants to heal. So I was experiencing body memories, emotional memories. I was going back into this memory, and again, contrary to popular belief, I'm not being re-traumatized, although I'm revisiting. This is actually the way that all of this got released. And so we'll go into that whole, if we ever want to get into that camp, we can. But anyway, so I'm telling him, I'm feeling like I've got these waves of nausea. And I'm hearing these words in my head as I'm feeling nauseated. And this is the quote: "Your will, your desire to resist is leaving you." Now, this is coming from, I'm tapping into a memory. So I'm feeling the waves of nausea physically, and I'm hearing the words that were being said in the moment. My therapist is quiet. I am just saying this now. I am just in the memory, and I'm speaking it out loud so that I can hear what, so I can hear the recording later and know what it was I was experiencing. I said, it's like I want to throw up. It's a real violent type of throwing up. And then my therapist asked me, did they give you something to cause your stomach to retch like this? And I says, yeah, it's like a small chocolate, like a Tootsie Roll or something. And I chew on it and swallow it. And then I'm standing in front of these men, and I'm feeling really nauseated. And I said, I start to cry. And then I start remembering other words and my own feeling, and I can start seeing that I'm vomiting in the memory, and I can hear, there's no way I'm gonna ever go back. What is this? And it's kind of, I'm piecing it together, and I'm starting to hear other voices. I'm starting to hear the men in the room, and they're like, "Do you want yourself back?" And I'm trying to gather this together. and I'm vomiting and I'm vomiting. Okay, that's that one place. And so as I'm throwing up and I'm having this horrible pain in my stomach, the men around me are saying, there you are, all over the floor. What do you desire? Do you desire to take that back up, to put that back inside of you? It's all there on the floor and it's all you. And I couldn't deny that because I'd just thrown it up, right? So under the influence of drugs, feeling really nauseated, and I am personally producing something, which is vomit. And so they're saying, you are the vomit and the bile that is on the floor before you. Is that what you want to be? Is that what you want of yourself? And then I hear one of the men's voices say, here we are. There's a group of men. Here we are. We are righteous and we're over here. You have a choice, talking to me. You have a choice. The vomit and the bile on the floor, or the strength of these men, the strength of the priesthood, the word of God. And as they kept going, I'm looking at this vomit and they're basically saying, we can take you, we can guide you, we can mold you. We can create a beautiful woman that could do much good under our guidance, under our direction. And then another one of the men says, or you can eat that vomit that you are. And then I hear somebody else say, come back, come back. And I was confused because I'm hearing all of these different voices. And then one of them pops in with a scripture and says, come unto me, all ye that are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. And the other men start laughing. And then one of them drops in and says, you are vomit, you are bile, you are retching yourself onto the floor. You stink, you're putrid. Go ahead, choose yourself. And another man says, or choose us. Somebody said something about the peaceable things of the kingdom. And I see somebody else, one of the other men standing there laughing to himself. And he makes enough of a facial movement that I notice him right then, and he smirks. I see another one of the men there and another one. Who is this? I'm trying to figure out who this is. That reminds me of, I can't get his name. I see his face. How old is he now? I'm trying to get the details. It's somebody different. I know it's not this man. I know it's not that man. He's standing right there. I'm looking at the other faces and I can see them. This one's on my left, and then the one's in the middle, and there's somebody behind him. And then right next to him, I keep seeing another one's face. And so in the memory, I'm trying to, I'm witnessing myself in vomiting, and I'm trying to figure out who these men are. I see one face, I see another. I'm trying to figure out if there's 3 or 4 or 5 of them there. One of them grabs me by the back of my neck and shoves me down. And he says, this is you. Eat the vomit. This is what you are. Take yourself back in. It's so putrid. It stinks to me. And then I hear another one again, come unto me. Come unto me. Then I hear another one, you bitch, you idiot. You gave yourself up for us. Come unto us. Crawl over here. Come unto us. So I've got this duality going on. It was just a flash, but it was terrifying. So I crawl away from the vomit. One of them has kept his robe on, and he puts the hood back over his head. The other ones have their suits on. So I'm seeing the robes and the suits and the robes and the suits. You fool, you gave yourself up for us, and I know I can't win. Of course you can't. That's the whole intent. You're stupid. You're stupid. You think this is what we want? Do you think we want you? We don't want you. Now I'm confused because everything's contrary. And what they want me to see is there they are in the suits, and there they are in the robes. There they want me, there they don't want me. I'm not one of them. I know this, I'm saying this out loud. I'm not one of them, but they want to control me. You have no say in anything. This is me telling myself, you've got no say in anything. I did what they wanted. I came to them, and then they said, you did what they wanted. You did what we wanted. You came to us. It's like they're totally reinforcing that I don't have a will of my own. It's like I was being told to eat my vomit, and then they were telling me to come to them. And either way, I'm doing what somebody says, and I have got nothing that I want to do, and I've got no say in any of it. I don't even allow myself an option. I don't even have a choice. I'm so traumatized, I can't even stand up and say, this is bullshit, and walk out. Somehow, I think they said that I came willingly. So now I'm in that whole, like dichotomy. I just know that when I stopped crawling over to them, I got attacked. I got hit, and I got kicked, and I got slapped. I got beaten, not hard, but beaten. and they're laughing about it. And then one of them that put the robe back on said, "Stop," really loud and very sternly. And they all stop, and he walks over to me and says, "See, you have no choice. You've never had a choice. It's in your best interest to serve us, because the alternative is shit and vomit." And it's like he'd left a pile of shit there with the vomit to illustrate what I am. Now I'm sensing in a little bit more of the sensations of my body, and I can feel more and more of how I'm still feeling it. As all of this is happening, I'm also, they're aware of where I am with what's going on. And the words now, they're switching, and they say, "You will find that you love us. You will find that you love this. You will find that you have a choice." But I'm also being held down. Spread eagle. There's a man on each arm and one on each foot. And one of them is up by my head. And I feel like he has something by my throat, something sharp at my throat. It's on the left side. And there's another one that is down between my legs with a very, very large dagger, a sword. The one that's up by my head says, "You have a choice. You will accept us, or you will accept this." And you will feel it slide inside of you, cutting as it goes. But I tell you, he won't stop there. He'll cut you all the way up to your throat, and you'll still be alive to feel it until he drives it into your heart. And you'll feel the very last beat with the sword going through it. He hates women, but he likes to see them suffer. I can guarantee he will not do this quickly. He won't make it fast, and you will feel every inch of that blade slice through you. What do you want? And then on the right side of my neck, I hear this little click, and I get this injection into my neck of a drug. And then the other one says, "Who do you love?" And I begin to feel like my head is kind of spinning, and he raises up my head so I can see the other guy with the sword, and he's beginning to put it inside of my vagina. And I scream, "No, no." And the one holding my head says, "Hold on. She might just love us more than she thinks she does. Let's give her a moment." Okay, remember, I just got drugged. All right. Remember, they've done drug testing for a very long time, and they know what they are administering at every stage. So they're giving me a moment. They're letting this drug start to get through my system. He backs away, and I keep hearing, "Who do you love? Who do you love?" And then there's more than one voice. Now it's like voices. And I can say to them, "You." And I begin to shake, and I begin to respond to the voices by saying "you." And I keep saying "you." And I start to feel very, very sensual and very sexual. The drug is taken over, and so have the threats. And then I hear them say, "See, you love us." Then each of them has sex with me. And the one that has the sword doesn't. It's like he's standing there with the sword as the threat outside of that circle. I hear another one. Let's see. Oh, yeah, I actually have orgasms because of the sexual experiences that are happening, which is horrifying. But I'm also under the influence of drug, which doesn't matter. So there's also internal confusion that's going on, realistically. They tell me, okay, I actually have orgasms, and they tell me that it's much more that because of those, that tells me how much more I love them. The drug is still so strong that regardless of what my body has done, I still act sexual and accept each of them as much as they want. It's super humiliating for me to remember this, but that is what's going on with me. And then I hear the words, "You've chosen us. You've chosen nothing of yourself. You have left yourself behind. There is nothing of you left. There is nothing of you inside there. We told you that you would love us, and now we can mold you, and now we will mold you and make you anything we want you to be. We want you to be, because you've left yourself behind. You have no identity. You have left your inside out. You belong to us. When we call you, you will come." Now I feel like I'm kind of coming off the drug, and I'm laying on the floor, and I don't know how many times, but I have been raped, but I still feel the sexual and the good feelings that were along with that drug, that euphoria that was there. But I'm also feeling sick, like I don't feel good, and there's pain between my legs, and it throbs, and I've been very, very used and abused and over sexualized and overstimulated. I've been told that I have no identity. Nothing is of me anymore, and nothing is in me anymore. It's all laying on the floor. And somehow I'm hearing, "If you ever leave us, your reward will be the sword." Like the whole thing of being sliced up the middle is still a threat. Remember, you have nothing to go back to, is what they say. So I don't even have myself. All you have is us, and you'll love it. You'll love us. And now I hear one of them say, and now you're happy. Go serve others, obey the priesthood, follow your leaders. Without them, you have no guidance. Remember, you left yourself behind. Stay close, don't stray far. We are always watching. And then one of them says to me, and always follow the promptings of the Holy Ghost. And he takes a cattle prod, really low level electrical rod, and he runs it down my spine. It's not very strong, but I can feel the electrical impulses. And I feel it. And that's one of the things that I would always look for when I would pray, because I was looking for the tingling in my spine to tell me that it was God talking to me. So they even mixed up how that worked with me and for me. And then they would prompt me afterwards to tell me what I was to do next, as far as like, now you're going to go get dressed, and then you're going to go back to school, and you're going to go. And so they just kind of set up the scenario, which in a huge reality was a relief, because you want the relief. Like the impact of the trauma is so huge that to be able to exit that, every part of you is like, anything, let's get out of here. So the physiological experiences that are happening are timed, they're also known, and then the prompts of what's going to happen next are given as well. I also know that before, part of this particular experience, these men all came forward in suits, and these were, I'm talking about like the top 15. This was an experience with the leaders of the church that happened to me. I think I was like early college when that happened. And so I was enough of a young adult that that would be actually, I don't know, that would, it wasn't a child rape. It would be enough of a like a young adult rape and ceremony. But I'd also gone through so much that the personality, switches were there. And my main handler from the church, was one of the main guys that was talking to me, and had brought me to that ceremony or that session. It does go on. This was a tiny slice. I don't leave after this. I'm not dismissed. It gets more gruesome and more like there's not a relief. So that's part of what the whole conditioning is too, is you have this intense trauma, and then you have kind of a downtime. Whatever drug wears off, whatever their ceremony is, do they need to reset? Are they going to bring in a victim? What are they going to do next? But it is all a setup for what's going to be happening next. So I hope that illustrates pretty well, like the process of when you get into really deep recovery of memories, you're going to get words, names, faces, and you're going to get scenarios. And by getting those, you're going to be able to allow it to release, because now you're not holding that information anymore, like trapped inside of you. And puzzle pieces are going to start coming together more and more. But I liked the way that was actually illustrated. Like, of course, I'm not my vomit, but I'm not going to be processing that and looking at that going, that's not me. What are you guys talking about? No, clearly they are telling me that's me. I've got no way to deny that that's not me, because it came out from inside of me. And so now none of me is inside of me. It's all out there, and it's putrid. And it's a very classic setup that confuses a victim in the middle of everything. And then the rape, and always there's going to be a sexual violation, because physiologically, the rape is not only there to traumatize, but it also pushes the trauma in deeper. It's a physiological violation that pushes in programming deeper. So it gets stored even deeper, not just in the sexual organs, but also in the the psyche, the emotions of the body, different muscle groups, that kind of thing. So
Thank you for sharing that. What a horrific memory, and to see in that moment you just kind of stumbling through it in a sense and being like, what is going on? Like, what's this voice that I'm hearing? And oh my gosh, I'm seeing this and I'm feeling this, and it also goes to illustrate how they guilt the child into thinking the child consented, when in reality they're overpowering the child. There's adult men overpowering a little child, holding them down, drugging them, and then saying, who do you choose? Who do you choose? Well, of course, everybody, an adult, like if you're trying to, lock somebody down and gonna shove a freaking knife inside of them and slit them up to their throat and you have a cattle prod, like
Right.
everybody's going to say yes. Otherwise, the alternative is you're going to die, you know, and then
Absolutely.
you carry that guilt with you, like, oh my gosh, I said yes to that.
I said yes to that. Yeah. And then my body's responding to the rapes because physiologically that's what the body does, right? That was in my healing. That was a really, really hard. Whenever I would get the memories where there was a rape and I would orgasm with it, that's what they were going for. It was mortifying because I had been taught socially that the orgasm is, like that's the pinnacle of a sexual relationship thing that we're all supposed to be after, and it's consensual and it's beautiful and it's together. And so when you are in the middle of something absolutely horrendous, disgusting, and your body is responding the way a biological function that is being stimulated in that particular way is going to respond, and there's no mental override because that's already been influenced by trauma, dissociation, drugs, whatever else is going on. Your capacity to only take in the information and take in the programming, and then the body's just working on it's just working on its own mechanics, right? Then to be told, oh, you like it because there's this orgasm, right? No wonder there would have been, sexual confusion, sexual, like, I don't know, deviations, whatever. Whatever it is, confusion about how to even be in willing and consensual relationships later in my life, just in my waking adulthood as a married woman, right? Like a lot of confusion there. And it would be sourced back to situations like this that I didn't even know existed. But I'm trying to work with my body and I respond, and then something will happen, I get triggered. And, like even all of that was difficult to navigate in so many different ways. So when you're told in these horrible situations, plus you're under a euphoric drug that is, doing other things to your system to even like hyper accentualize, the way your body's responding, or even prior sexualization that, training that happened or would have happened at 3 and 4 and 5 and 6, this is the way you respond to, a particular male that says these words. This is where the beta kitty programming comes in, right? So you're not always going to be that person or be in that response mode, but it's there, it's anchored in there somewhere and can be called up in the right circumstances, and then you're going to bury it, you're going to forget it, and then off you go, right? So I'm trying to think about, there was one other thing the cattle prod. A lot of cattle prods, they use cattle prods a lot for torture and for programming. I had electric shock torture often, electrodes on my body, parts of my body that would be, like shocked, other parts not, depending on, what side you're supposed to be looking at. In fact, there was one part of this thing I wanted to read. Oh, okay. This is how I entered this memory. As I was going into the memory, the first thing that came forward were these words, whatever you want, and then a bow. And it was me, I was bowing, right? And I was really confused. I'm like, I'm not too sure what this means, but it's like I'm honoring something, and I don't know if it's a person or it's an object, but it's a symbol for Satan or something. Offerings, it might be a table offering, it might be a big gold serpent. I'm really not sure. It's vague, but I'm hearing words. You don't know who you are. You must listen to me for everything. But the voice, the words, it reminds me of this one particular man. And it's addressed to me. And it's like he's saying that I'm shit and I'm low and I'm vomit and I have no identity. You must worship those above you. You would have no identity without us. We have molded you and made you into what we want you to be. You will serve us. And then there's something about serving blindly, and something about the right hand not knowing what the left hand is doing, willingly, obediently, with a smile and cheerfulness, willingly obeying, submitting, serving, submitting to all of our wishes. You are a servant for us and our Lord. I got the impression that I would be serving them consciously and unconsciously, but not knowing it. Like there was two of me. Like I would know when I was serving them, but I wouldn't know that I had done that afterwards. I would forget. It's like I would forget that I was even there. It's like the right hand was not knowing what the left hand was doing, and the left hand was serving them. And then they said to me, our servant You are our servant to please us. Come to our call, respond to our voice, submit to our will. You will be our servant when we tell you, and you will forsake all and come to us. You will love only us. Your desires, your appetites, and passions will be only to us, second to nothing else. It feels like this is the same person that's talking to me. Do you know where this is happening? This is my therapist. Where is this happening to you? And I said, it feels dark. It's like a dark room, and there's other men there. And my therapist says, how are they dressed? And I says, well, I want to say they had suits on. It's like they had robes on over the suits, like they could open and close the robes so they could be confusing. So I can see them in suits and I see them the way they are normally during the day. But then they also have these robes, and these are the ones I'm supposed to serve. So either way, I serve them. I'm going to see them both ways, and no matter what, I'm going to be serving them. And I'm listening to this, and part of me feels trapped because with or without the robes, it's still them, and I have no way out. I have no escape. There's nothing I can do. The scary thing is that I'm going to love them, and I'm going to love loving them. He says to me, one of the men, you will wake up and discover that no matter what, you will love us. I have this horrifying image of being nude, and one of these men, he's raping me, and he's on top of me, and I'm horrified because I think I love it, and I'm supposed to love him, and I want it, but it's so wrong and scary, and I start crying, and I'm like, I want to say absolutely not. It's against everything within me I have inside, and he's telling me that I love it, and he's telling me that I'm going to love it, and then I'm going to find out that when I'm there, that regardless of what I thought, regardless of how I feel, this is the outcome. I'm going to love them, and I can't do anything about it. I've got no hope, and I've got no identity, and I've got no will. He's telling me how it's going to be. He's telling me there's no alternative. It's just already is. I have no choice. I have no me. And I'm going to find that in the end, it's them, and it's always been them, and it's never anything else other than them. And I'll have to give in, and I'll have to submit and relinquish myself to it and love it. And I hate them. I hate them, and I hate what I'm hearing, and I hate what's going on. And I'm not even going to exist. You will love our touch. You will love our words, our voices, our faces, and mannerisms. That sounds really strange, but I'm just going with what's in my head. But it makes sense. I can feel it inside. It makes sense. My therapist says, can you tell where this is happening? And I says, no, not yet. I sense it's downstairs. I got there through the tunnels, but I'm not sure yet. It feels like Temple Square. It has that feel to it. And now they're telling me that I will feel this draw or a magnetic pull. And now my stomach is starting to feel sick. It's like there's a purging, and I don't know what this is, but I'm going to start throwing up, and everything inside of me is going to be outside of me, and inside of me is me. And I could delay my coming to them, but I can't. Eventually it's leaving me, and it's going to be relinquished, and everything is going to go to them. Your desire to resist is leaving you. And this is where I start throwing up. So that was the precursor to what happened to that. So in all honesty, like the way the introduction is and the way it's formed, I'm really hoping that just that kind of lays out a lot of, like maybe that can help understand the way it's going in a victim's mind when you're in these things. So even as a child, when you're being told not to tell things, like when I would be in these really traumatic things and don't tell, and then, you're like, I won't tell, just don't keep doing this to me. And then more happens. And then the threats come, and then the pain happens. And like, there's so many things that go on. And so when it came to the electric shock and it came to all of those things, one of the ways that I was trained was, this is the way I was supposed to hear God's voice and feel that witness of the spirit. And they would turn on these electrocution pads, and they would have them in a sequence where I could feel it going down my back or different parts of my body. And if I did something or said something or looked at a picture, because they would have slides or a movie or something going on up there that they wanted me to have a reaction to, then they would turn the machine on or off depending on what it was they were wanting to do. Plus I would be under the influence of drugs, and there would always be a sexual violation. So whether with an object or with a male penis or whatever, there's always going to be that, because it's used as a tool. So anyway, do you have any questions so far?
Gosh, just thank you. This is I feel like sometimes for people in society, a lot of people now have heard of satanic ritual abuse. They've heard of human trafficking, but they still don't have this like fire in them that's like, oh my gosh, this is happening. I need to do something about it. And I
Mm-hmm.
feel like it's because there's that disconnect sort of that you were talking about in the very beginning, where we as a society compartmentalize that we live in a safe part of town. That only happens in these weird parts of town and these really vacant like trailer parks with these weirdos that do
Right.
drugs, and it's a one-off thing. And we don't want
Exactly.
to invite it close to home, like what you're saying, and
Mhm.
really like this is helping, in my opinion, hearing some of these experiences from you and from others who have been courageous enough to be vulnerable to share. It can
Yeah.
help bring that closer and to be like, no, like this instance that we're hearing about happened in a temple. Like it happened,
Underneath. Yeah.
yeah, like it happened in these underground layers of a temple. This wasn't, this is in your communities, you guys. Like this
Mhm.
is happening in places that you drive by every day, in places that are probably looked at maybe even with esteem, or
Mhm.
a historical part of town that's kind of cherished, and it's horrifying just to think about, that especially these people that are also put on a pedestal that go and then service church and are there to help people. And then there's probably survivors and people disclosing to them, because that's sort of
Mhm.
the hierarchy of the Mormon church too, which you talk
Yeah.
about, which is keep everything internal. Like you don't go see a therapist, you don't go out. There's a chain of command of like who you can disclose stuff to, and
Right.
to just
Right.
think about like how horrifying that is, that like there's children, every single person that should be protecting them, they're in establishments that we look at as safe places are
Right.
anything but,
Right.
and not to say, like you said, there's a lot of benign people in there that they're just going to church and, there's that superficial layer. They don't know anything's lurking under their feet, but
No.
think of that ignorance and like how close that is, that right underneath where people are going to church, there's these things
Mhm.
happening underground to children, is just
Mhm.
absolutely terrifying for me to think.
Yeah. It's terrifying. And I've had other people say, well, I mean, I would know the difference. I would feel the difference in the spirit. And I'm like, that's not true. No, that's not true at all. I mean, one of the things that is like relied upon or banked upon is members going to the temple with a good intention, with that higher energy. You're going to go in and you're in there as a collective doing what you feel is something that's bringing you closer to God. So you're bringing that feeling of coming closer to God with you. So you're bringing like that buoyant energy, while um at the lower levels there is this really dark energy that is happening. And the operative word here is energy. They're both energetics. And so in a very real way, that kind of buoyant energy, you kind of want to think that it's going up, but the point is it's actually being consumed. It's a collection, it is a structure that is containing people, and there is absolute horror and like mayhem and I give me good words, like what, like this obscene amount of insanity. I'm not, it's not insanity, they know exactly what they're doing. Of these planned murders and sacrifices and bloodletting and terrorization of humans that's going on down in these lower levels in these different areas of your town, in this case in the temple. And your positive energy or your higher energy is still energy, and you're in a container there. It's still being utilized and drawn from. So you're contributing just even by walking in. And that's a hard thing to hear, but I'm also going to be saying, if you understand that, I mean, people say I've had such amazing experiences in the temple. Well, I did too. And I knew what it was, like this is before I was like associating all of that stuff. But um what that attests to is the power of who you are, of you as a human powerhouse. Just we're these beautiful energetic conductors, and we also produce energy. And you can like have your own intention, and you can have these amazing experiences when you intend to. And there's a number of people gathering in this structure that are wanting the same thing. You guys are going to, that's going to start helping that be there. Just like if you had an intention, a group, and you're going to go like have a retreat up in the woods, and you guys are going to get together and everybody's going to be there in a positive energy, you're going to come away with some really positive things. Like it's not much different other than the massive energy and the way things are structured to in the whole mind control of the social system, that you keep your energy and you keep your intention in a particular way. And the hierarchy is also set up to, like, not really encourage you to practice going to God on your own, outside of the little slice of what you can in your own prayers. There is a hierarchy. You're going to report up. So that's why it was horrifying to me to even think that I would step into therapy, because it was really looked down upon, at least the way I was raised. And it was supported by the social system that I was in, is like, if you've got an issue, you go to the bishop. He's, the local ecclesiastical leader. You're going to go talk to him about this issue. And this is why a lot of the sexual abuse for children has not been reported in the church, because the mothers or fathers or whatever will take their child in, or they will go tell their bishop, because that's what they've been told to do. And they're like, it keeps it contained. And so then the bishop's instructions is to call the church's hotline, which goes right to the church's legal system. So you're actually reporting your crime that's happening in your church to your perpetrator, in essence, and their legal system. So you're now in a legal loop that you really have a hard time, like, getting out of, or really remedying, because they've kept it in-house now, because the report went to their legal department, or their legal, it's more than a department. They own an entire legal system. But anyway, so when I was younger, my dad was in hospital administration. And so he was in hospitals all the time. And when you're in the hospitals, then you have access to the physicians and the nurses and the anesthesiologists and the maintenance people, the kitchen, the whatever, right? So because he was in administration, also had, door codes and keys and all of this stuff. So when I said that I had experiences in hospital morgues, I'm not kidding. There was conditioning and stuff that happened in the hospital morgues, where I had one memory at one point where there was a number of us children. I don't remember how many, but we were put in the morgue drawers. And it was like now people actually go to those what are the sensory lounges, where you kind of like float in the salt water and you just kind of
Sensory deprivation tank.
sensory deprivation. Yeah. So it's kind of the same idea, except it was, again, with some drugging, and the way the morgue drawer was set up, plus it was cold. And they had it set up so there was like speakers on either side of my head. So there was a recording going on that, again, the church owns an entire film department and communications crew and all this. So this is not like a big stretch at all. But there was a recordings about I have the words, it's in another one of my memories, but the words that were in there and the way the drugs that were administered were also not only disorienting, but I was on something that was fairly psychedelic, but also very depressive. And in the Mormon church, there's a hierarchy of reaching heaven. So the highest level is the celestial, then there's this terrestrial middle kingdom, and then telestial kingdom is the lowest. But if you don't even qualify to be in a kingdom that God recognizes, then you're put out to outer darkness, which is not even hell. It's just this, what it sounds like. It's outer darkness. And part of the recording, so what was being introduced is that we as the children, but in this isolation chamber, I was experiencing outer darkness. Like, the thing that was so terrifying and horrifying about this particular program, or this conditioning method, was I was experiencing the nothingness, because I couldn't feel myself. So no sensory, right? And yet I could hear that that's where I was. And on top of that, even God didn't know I existed, which was horrible, because then, as the voice was telling me, I couldn't even call out to or pray to God, because God didn't know I was missing. And God didn't even know that I existed, because I am now so far out of existence in this outer darkness realm of nothingness that I don't exist. And it was the biggest mind bend. And it was so horrifying to think that I couldn't even be missed by God. Like, I was existing because I knew I was, but I wasn't existing, and I couldn't even call for help. Like, it was one of the most debilitating
So
mental
sad.
experiences ever. It was really, really horrifying. It was terrible. And I honestly did not come back from that until I got that memory. Like, the self loathing and the self depreciation and the lack of self trust and the lack of self knowing was so present. And I'm not saying it was present in my everyday life, but that got locked in, and
Yeah.
that was there. And it would fuel any time I was in a self-punishment mode, I guess is a good way to put it. You know how we all kind of like, oh, I shouldn't have done this, blah, blah, blah. It
Yeah.
could spiral even deeper to where killing myself would be, like an option, because, self-elimination program was also active. But then it would also be a complete annihilation of self. Like, it was so present and so unreachable at the same time. It was kind of like really weird in a crazy making way. And that was a hard one to pull myself out of. So getting that memory, that was super groundbreaking and super hard. Um, but that was the effect of that one on me. And so, where I wanted to go again, wrapping around to this other thing, and then I'm going to wrap it up,
Yeah.
is to keep the
I can just
therapy
say too, real
secret.
quick.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
You just reminded me of a comment that somebody left on my YouTube, which they said it like ironically, but it was like so true. They were like, wow, this person was crying out to God when they were 4 years old, and I was eating my mom's lipstick when I
Yeah,
was four, you know? And it's like, when I
that
hear
makes me
this
want to cry.
story, yeah, it just like, it makes me want to cry too whenever I hear this, because I think about like my childhood and I'm like,
Mhm.
I had like no conceptualization of like death or like harm
Right.
people. Like, that was like so out of the realm. And like trying to put myself in your shoes just makes me like so sad that like that's what
Mhm.
you were thinking about like as a kid. Like, you had to like
Yeah.
consider that you were nothing. And I'm just like, what? Like, this is so messed up, you know? Like,
Yeah.
so incredibly sad. But I appreciate you sharing because, I know that that's a big, it's validating for people, like how you say you like to do. Like, that's a feeling a lot of survivors have, is overcoming
Mhm.
those feelings of the nothingness that they were told that they are, which is nothing could be further from the truth, you know?
And I really like that you say that. So when if you and I were sitting across from each other, and I don't know that this is really alive in me, right? That I had that experience, it's all been forgotten. And I'm just telling you, it's like, I just feel like nothing. I just feel like, and I'm lamenting to you as my friend, right? And you're like, oh no, nothing could be further from the truth. And I know God loves you. When people would ever say that to me, it landed on nothing. Like, that meant nothing to me. I was just like, thanks. And it wasn't sarcastic. It wasn't like I'm dismissing what it is, but it was like, I have no place to comprehend what this is. What you just said has got no place for me, because not only did I have that experience, but multiple experiences of being in a painful, tortured position where Jesus, the man that is posing as Jesus and dressed as Jesus, is standing there, and I'm supposed to be reaching out for him to help, and I'm realizing he's the one that's got the cattle prod. He's the one torturing me. So my trust of Jesus is really like, what's going on? And another man dressed as Lucifer walks in and rescues me. So now I've got a part of me that is like totally aligning with my rescuer. So I'm trauma bonding to Lucifer, right? That goes inside. And now I've got a part of me that is like, man, I don't know about this God Jesus thing, because that's not fun, right? How am I? Confusion. You're telling me God loves me. And I'm like, I'll tell you what, he doesn't. And it's a real statement. And all of this is playing in the background. Or I've got another time where I'm being tortured, being raped, or I'm watching a puppy being like dismembered, or I'm watching another child about to be killed or something. And they're like, pray to your God. Pray, pray. Get on your knees, pray to your God. If he's real, he'll rescue. That doesn't happen. What what do you do with that? Well, I'll tell you, you anchor in that your prayers don't matter, because then what they tell you, because now this is like you're blown wide open, you just saw something annihilated and dismembered and like completely tortured to death in front of you. And they're telling you that you didn't pray hard enough, or they're telling you that God doesn't listen to you or know who you are. They're telling you that, that side of God. And then they're also telling you that God doesn't listen. So they're demonizing you and they're demonizing God, and there's really nothing, there's nothing to anchor in. So with all of that, again, it's all repressed, it's still there. There's still these memories that are part of my reality, and you're trying in your most loving way to tell me that your experience with God and the way you feel about me like is so real. And I'm like, I really don't understand what you're saying here. Like, thanks. I love you, appreciate you. And then I walk away going, she doesn't get it. But I also walk away going, and I don't get it either. There's so little space for any of this to land except for what your real experience, in my case, that was all forgotten, amnesic, whatever, in that trauma brain side of me, what is not active, because I'm not working in trauma right now. We're talking when trauma, we've got to go back into it to allow it to come back out, right? That was my experience. And like, it came out in spades. It came out really, really clearly. And I also discovered, I get shocked when I tell. Something dies if they told. I'm watching murders because somebody tried to exit the society, and oh God, just horrible, horrible ones. But just even during the middle, about the same time as I had this sensory deprivation situation, I also had it could have been real close in timing, but I had a thing. I was at home and I just felt like the world would be better off without me. That was always my thought. The world would be better off without me. Like, I would be doing the world a favor if I killed myself. Right. And at 10 years old, I'm seriously contemplating the way I would do it. And I think it was October. October is a horrible month for tracking all of this, just because, October traditionally, and in the church, they're high sacrifice month, because of general conference, but it's also hunting season. And my dad had gotten a deer and he'd hung it up in the garage, and I was trying to figure out, this deer is there, like, I want to say it was done. I don't know. It just feels like it would have been done purposely, but point is, deer's in the garage and it's hanging. And I'm wondering, like, is there something over there that I could use? You know what I'm saying? Like, how do I get rid of myself? How do I get myself out of this? And in the middle of that serious contemplation, my family dog came over and sat by me. And because I was in the middle of this downward spiral again, really going deep, like I'm nothing, and the world's better off without me. And I'm crying, and the dog comes over and, like, sits right next to me and nuzzles me and all of this stuff. And that dog saved my life in that moment, popped me out of that spin, because I thought, but he would miss me, and so the family dog, he played a major role in some of these things where I was, it was just the right opportunity at the right time, and the whole right thing. And I like, that just had always stayed with me, and then I had another family dog experience where they killed her in front of me, to prove to me that she couldn't protect me. Like, it's so layered and varied and not fun. But I did want to say, like, my dad, because he had access to the hospital, one of these times he actually, I think it was 5th grade, he came over and picked me up from school unannounced, but he picked me up and he said, do you want to go to lunch today? And I'm like, yeah, sure, that'd be great. I would love the idea of going to lunch with my dad. And so we went over to the hospital to eat in the cafeteria. That's fine. I'm still going to be eating with my dad, right? And we go through the back door, through the morgue, of course, and enter in this back way, and then go up this elevator onto this other floor. We're going down this hallway, and he stops at this door and he punches in the code or whatever it is, how he gets through the door. And we're in the psych ward, and we're walking through the psych ward to get to the cafeteria. I don't know. I mean, I'm 5. I'm with or not 5. I'm, young. I'm with my dad. 5th grade. And this was one of the most terrifying places I could imagine, because people were like catatonic, they're sitting in these wheelchairs, some of them were drooling, some of them were pounding on doors. Like, there was just some moments of like, like, what is going on? Like, what is this place? And so I was nervous. It was unusual to me. And my dad says to me, this is where people go that talk too much or that remember things they shouldn't. And then we exited and we went off, and, I was like, okay, great. Just get me chocolate milk. Like, I just got to, but something like that anchored. because I was dissociating, right? I'm in a place, I'm unsafe, there's things going on, and I go, boop, I'm split, right? And so dissociating doesn't mean that you zone out and you're all over the place. It just means now you're open, right? That in this case, I was open and I heard what I was seeing. I heard his words, I saw what I was seeing. And then once we crossed that threshold, that door, we're done. I'm good. Let's get away. And now I'm giving something, I wanted something sweet. And the interesting thing about sugar, because sugar is a drug, sugar is always administered afterwards as well, because it helps like regulate the nervous system and it puts the memory down lower. And so then you can actually come out of a memory, maybe dissociated or disoriented or whatever. And this is a great opportunity for your handler to say, wow, you fell asleep during that party. What was going on? And you're just like, what party? Okay, yeah, there was a party. Sure. Okay. You know what I mean? This is one of those things where before the days of any, cell phones and photos, they're just telling you what your experience was that you fell asleep in. And yeah, that's what happened. Okay, I'm with you. Like, I don't know. But in this case, we had lunch. He starts talking about something completely different, drops me off back at school, but took that opportunity, that snapshot to drive in programming of don't talk and don't tell. And therapy equals bad. So it was an immense act of courage, not even faith, courage, for me to dial the phone number I had, that contact number I had of a therapist, just because not only socially was that kind of like a taboo, I had seen things and I knew I didn't want to go there. But again, it was all subconscious. So I mean, my hand's shaking when I dialed that number. And ironically, got to put this in here. The programming is when a victim begins to remember or starts the programming starts to kind of get a little unstable. The programming is always to contact your handler, and it's usually set up in a way that it's somebody you trust. So a lot of times when I was younger, I would be in ceremony and my dad, may or may not be present, but when he wasn't present in the ceremony proper, he would be the one that I would be handed off to after it was done. And so the association was icky, horrible, bad stuff. And oh, good, here's dad. I'm going home. I'm safe. And so the bond was with that rescuer. And so as my handler, I had an early established training that I could trust him. So when my programming started breaking down and I had this option because I wanted to find out what the root of my depression was, my initial program actually kicked in. And so instead of dialing the phone number of the therapist, I called my dad. And I was going to tell him, hey, I got this issue. I really need to talk. And that's exactly what I said. So I'm like, I couldn't do the therapist. I called my dad first and I said, I'm going through some really, really rough stuff. And there's some big things that are happening to me. And I'm just wondering if we could go to lunch sometime. Do you have some free time? Like soon? And he says, you know what? Your mom and I are in Florida. We're getting on the cruise ship and we'll be back in 10 days. And I'll just call you when we get back. Can we get together then? And I was like, yeah, that would be great. And I hung up the phone and I'm like, I don't have 10 days in me anymore. So that's when I called the therapist. So I was still following the programming, but by an act of divine intervention, when this came to a head, I ended up, I did follow the programming. I did go and tell my handler, right? I was going to go spill all that I was going through. And instead I got guided to the person that actually was going to help me heal. And I was able to get in 2 days later and go through this process. And, when my dad got back, he did call and I'm like, oh, it's okay. It's not a big deal. Like I was just trying to like push it off. Like, oh, I don't know. I don't want to tell anybody I'm in therapy now. That was the motivation to not tell him. I still hadn't, I was still kind of like in this whole, well, these memories or these things are like symbolic and I don't know what they are yet. And so I was still in discovery process, but I was mortified to tell anybody I was like seeing a therapist, like, oh, don't do that. So honestly, programs are going to be playing out even during your healing. And there is protection that happens. And there's also things that happen that, you're just going to trip your way through and, maybe say the wrong thing to the right person or the right thing to the wrong person or whatever it is. And you still got to stay loyal to yourself and what your healing is. Like that is the best way for you just to keep moving forward and, keep trusting yourself. And then the more you trust yourself, the more you can see where you're not to trust yourself. You know what I mean? Like, oh, that's program. Let's work on that, and just, yeah, I don't know. It's a journey, and it's worth every ounce of your commitment to yourself, whatever that looks like and whatever that means. And honestly, don't be afraid. It is everywhere, and there are a lot of people involved. And your job is not necessarily to run around kind of scared and protecting yourself and worried that your kids are going to get snatched, but to really just start moving yourself into your own awareness, and being aware of yourself, and where do you respond and where don't you respond. And this is across the board, whether you've got high trauma, deep trauma or not. Your own awareness is you engaging in your life, and that's super valuable. So anyway, there's a lot more I can share. I appreciate you letting me read part of my session today, and listening to some of these things that I've said, maybe before, and other things. But I just, if anybody's got, some questions, I'm open. Maybe they can email you or email me or whatever. That's always possible. I am setting things up so I can open up my schedule for more client work. I am actually excited because I am putting together a kind of a group gathering that's going to be happening. And so let me explain what's happening here really quick. Okay.
Yeah.
So on my website right now, and this is currently the way it is, you've got to type in www first, just because I don't have the links set up yet to do it. Anyway, so if you type in, there it is, www.asiaraine.com. This is what my site looks like. And you can work with me, or you can actually hit the link to Letters to the People, and that's my podcast. The podcast has been, it's been going, like I started it like in 2021, I think. And I do have some episodes on there, and then series of events. I haven't been putting my own episodes up, but I have been doing a lot of interviews. And so the interviews are on that link. So you can go there. But also, if you go back to the homepage and you scroll down a little bit where it says products, right there is the Inner Archaeologist tracking calendar, and it's free. You just click on it. And I need to email it to you. So you got to pop in your email. And this is a calendar. It's a 3-month calendar, and I'm going to be doing more and more with it. But it's a 3-month calendar, and it's a tool that you can use. So I highly suggest you print it out, and I highly suggest that you commit to at least 3 months of this. And what you want to do is you want to utilize it as a tool of watching yourself. So think of yourself as an archaeologist, right? You need to take survey of the land. You've got to kind of start taking information in. And so if you want to track something, let's say that you've noticed that you feel nauseated every time you drive by the elementary school or something like that. And you're like, well, is that true? Or is that really, like, what is the thing here? And you're like, I just want to track what that is. Where's this nausea? What is there a trigger? Maybe there is, maybe there isn't, something like that, right? And so you just note on this calendar when it is that you notice this same emotion. And pretty soon, let's say that it happens the 8th of every month. So it's like, oh, okay, it's happening the 8th of every month. I've noticed that because I've been tracking this for 3 months. But you are also noticing that it is also on every Tuesday. And so you're like, every Tuesday, but the number 8 seems to be starting it earlier. And I'm driving by the middle school, and I'm parked in front, and so you're starting to give yourself this information, right? What you're doing is you're giving yourself a snapshot or an overview of things that seem actually more random, that are actually more patterned. And so what I want to be doing with this Inner Archaeologist program is go ahead and download it. You don't have to join us or not, but I want to do a 6-week run with you over this Inner Archaeologist program. And so I'm going to get a start date, and I'll announce that. I don't have the date right now because I'm getting it put together, but especially as we're leading up to the fall. And this is where a lot of victims really start getting into a lot of their triggers, because September, October, November, December, January, it's just, sacrifice season. I don't know another way to put it. Things, we got the solstice that leads into October, which is always for Mormons General Conference, which goes into Halloween, which goes into November. And there's dates on the calendar that, connect with the Satanic calendar, and they have their own events. And so birthdays, if your birthday's on there, it's really good to like do a whole year, because your birthday comes around every year. And I had a lot of birthday ceremony. Most everybody that I have worked with or that I know that's recovering memories have programming and triggering around their birthdays, major holidays. Like it's all exploited. It all can be something. So the point of this calendar is to kind of give you more of an overview and give you a little bit more validation. So I'm going to lead a group, and we're going to download our calendars, and we're going to meet every week, probably every Sunday evening, just for about, the 45 minutes to an hour, and go over what's going on and see if we can help each other track. And it's going to be kind of a peer-led thing. I'll be leading the group, but I'm also going to be doing it with you, just so we can all kind of understand what that is. And then I am currently writing an inner archaeologist program that can help you really establish an open communication avenues with your younger parts, with your inner self. Some people call it shadow work, some people call it inner child work. All of that is the same thing, but I have a unique approach to it as far as creating relationship, so that those voices, and as I was, as you heard me read today, that was me remembering, but it was also me in that age telling me about what it was that she experienced. And so it's really a unique way to communicate with yourself and start trusting more and more, and building that inner trust that that a lot of the repressed programming is lacking. And so that's also something that I'm currently underway of developing, and that's going to be an offering here on my website as well too. So I'm bringing more and more programs out. And so I'll let Emma know when I'm going to be doing this. I'm looking at maybe August, starting that 6-week program, because I want to kind of capture leading up into September. So we'll get this going, and I would love for you to join me. But you do need to download the calendar. Again, it's free. It's for you. I'm working on my website. So you're on a page right here that I haven't really like done anything with yet. So
Okay.
I'm a one-man band. I'm building, and I'm helping, and I'm teaching, and I'm doing all my things here. So, and I'll have some more episodes up on my podcast. I just did an episode myself, where I was talking to a friend of mine that's she used to be an attorney, and she and I are talking about false memory syndrome. So that's going to go up here on the podcast as soon as I get that edited and up. It's been unique and interesting trying to put this together, kind of as a one-man show, trying to do a number of things, as you well know, right? There's some challenges. It takes some time, I guess, is what I'm going to say, So anyway, thank you for your patience with me. As if any of you are listening to this and you're like, oh my gosh, Asia, get that stuff up there. It's coming. I promise it's coming.
Yeah. And if people did want to contact you, if somebody's like, wow, like I'd love to contact her and see if I could work one-on-one with her, is the best way email? Do you have a place on your website that people can connect with you? What's the best way they can
Yeah, the best way is actually email. So go ahead and email me. You can go to my website here and email me a message. That would be great. And I will see that probably the best. I am on all the socials. So I'm on there as on Instagram. I am .asiaraine. Letters to the People podcast is also on Instagram. And you can follow me also in other ways. Like I'm bringing my YouTube channel up, trying to get that up to speed. So working on a number of outlets. But yeah, if they wanted to get a hold of me, it would be great for you to email me. I do have an email available on the podcast website as well. And you can reach out to me that way also. So yeah, those would be great ways to create contacts.
Oh, awesome. I love seeing survivors like you, Asia, become the warrior of your story and take all the things that caused you pain and turn them into something beautiful that you can now, you know, your torch is lit and now you can go share it and other people see you and you're lighting the candle of other people now, and it's really
Yeah.
beautiful. And like I said,
Yeah.
I've had a lot of requests for you to come on, so it's an honor to have you come on, and I want you to know again that your work does make a difference. Your vulnerability is beautiful and your storytelling is eloquent and harrowing, but inspiring at the same time to see where you were and to see where you are right now. It's just mind-blowing to consider what
Mm-hmm.
you went through. Nobody'd ever guess by, just walking by you on the street or talking to you. So it's a true testament of your healing journey and the work that you've put in to be here today, and we're lucky we get to hear this. This is information we shouldn't be hearing from somebody who shouldn't be on the other side like you are. They do really put every barrier in place for people to not leave these systems. It's such an anomaly when somebody does. So I want to
Yeah.
thank you from the bottom of my heart, not only for coming on here, but for your service to humanity, and for creating all of these positive outlets and for using your voice to help set the captives free and help people on the other side, get to where you are.
Yes, that is totally my goal. So thank you for recognizing that. It has been a delight to be here with you. Thank you so much for all you're doing and your presence as well. Just kudos to you and just, moving forward with all of this. So thank you.
Thank you. And for everybody listening, I will have Asia's websites and her podcast below. I would love if you guys are interested in contacting her to reach out to her. It's always great whenever we can find people in the community that are helping with healing and helping with getting us to that other side, who understand SRA, who understand mind control.
Mhm.
That's very uncommon in the therapeutic industry and in counseling and these different, even in the church, trauma informed people are very rare to come by, which is really sad when
Mhm.
understanding complex trauma and, dissociative identity disorder. So I would love
Yeah.
if you guys went and connected with her on her podcast and supported her. I'll have all those links below too. That's one of the best ways that we can support
Yeah.
survivors is by supporting their work. And it costs nothing to just go subscribe and listen to an episode,
That's true. Hmm.
and to go
That's
share.
true. I'm going to drop in here too. Also, I mean, one of the ways that I have been supporting myself as a silversmith is making jewelry, and so I do some. I do put it on my website. I have other outlets that I put it on as well. But yeah, I still, this is still the way I've been trying to support myself, and it's a very interesting place to, what I'm trying to do is actually pivot over into doing this more full time. And so if you go to asiarainedesigns.com, that's the website for designs. Yeah, that's the website for my jewelry. And let's see, that should be. And you're welcome to, like, if there's anything on there that you think is amazing and beautiful, yeah,
Here
jump
we
on.
go.
And I do have more that I'm actually going to be loading up here too, but I'm always putting different things on there. I enjoy, and I am a jewelry class instructor, so that one I can do kind of private lessons and sessions with. So yeah,
Oh, this is so
I
neat.
know they're
I
great
totally
things.
forgot to bring this up.
That's
Yeah,
okay. Yeah, they're good.
I will absolutely have this in the show notes too, and would love if you guys went and, again, a business from somebody, exactly where your money's going directly to a survivor. You're not crossing through a third party nonprofit or otherwise.
Mhm.
It's so fun to see survivors starting businesses and podcasts. It's things that a lot of people that don't have all the barriers that you do and did never do in their life, and you're doing
Mhm.
a whole bunch of them. So it's really cool to see
Just
this.
try.
So I'll have
Thanks.
all of these links in the show notes, you guys, and encourage you guys again to go support. It's a really easy way to help survivors do what they do. I would love if Asia and every survivor speaking out could um be financed somehow. The government's never going to pay us to do advocacy work against them. So we
Yeah.
have to we have to help resource survivors and those of us who are helping
Mhm.
get this information out. So please go support Asia, you guys. And Asia, thank you
Yeah.
again for coming on. It's
Thank
an
you.
honor. And
Thank you. I appreciate that.
I'll have Asia's
Okay.
links in the show notes. I'll have my links in the show notes. We can't thank you guys enough on the other side for supporting. We can't do it without you. Thank you guys for listening. God bless you, and we will see you next time.